Chapter 13:10. When the 30-meter tall and 10-meter wide door appeared, Ji Tianqing was incomparably excited. The tall and majestic divine thunderbolt door was a dazzling purple. Purple lightning curled around the door frame and lintel, as if dragons and snakes were slithering about. Inside the door was a purple whirlpool that led to an unknown place, making it seem extremely mysterious. Tianqing, you only have 2 breaths of time. Don't hesitate and quickly go in. The burial of heaven's voice rang out in Ji Tianqing's mind, sounding somewhat urgent. Ji Tianqing was already exhausted, and his entire body was sore and weak. Even taking a single step was difficult for him. When he heard the burial of heaven's urging, he still hesitated for a moment. After all, he still had worries in his heart. If I pass through this divine thunderbolt door and really reach Shenwu continent, how will I return? He still had friends and family on the Tianxian continent, and there were still many things that he had not finished. The demon emperor was not dead, and the demon army was still attacking the 3 races, causing chaos in the world. The ancestral demon god was about to awaken and be reborn, and when that time came, he would definitely sweep across the world and plunge the world into misery and suffering. If he left the Tianxian continent and stepped onto another continent, he would be safe and could even start a new journey on the martial path. But what about his friends and family? Who would resolve the crisis of the human race? Who would be able to resist the impending calamity? At this moment, many thoughts flashed through Ji Tianqing's mind. He was not a saint, and he definitely would not take on the responsibility of saving the world. However, there were too many people and things that he could not let go of. How could he so easily cut off his emotions and desires and become carefree? At this moment, the burial of heaven's voice rang out once more. Tianqing, don't hesitate anymore. Trust me. Ji Tianqing also knew that this was a rare opportunity, and he would regret it if he missed it. Thus, he hurriedly erupted with the last of his strength and desperately rushed towards the divine thunderbolt door that was 100 steps away. In just 2 breaths of time, he had crossed the distance of 100 steps like a gust of wind and rushed into the door with all his might. Whoosh! His figure was submerged in purple lightning, and he instantly disappeared without a trace. Almost at the same time as he charged into the divine thunderbolt gate, the 2 breaths of time ended. The entire divine thunderbolt array naturally dissipated, and the divine gate also disappeared into thin air. The 9 heavens platform regained its calm, and the dazzling purple lightning that covered the ground also disappeared without a trace. It was as if nothing had happened. Dozens of miles away from the 9 heavens platform, Old Ancestor 3 Absolute still hadn't left. He was still sitting in the air above the sea. Just now, when Ji Tianqing had used the power of thunder and activated the divine thunderbolt formation, he had seen everything clearly. He had personally witnessed Ji Tianqing's strength increase explosively. He had even released boundless lightning and opened a divine gate of lightning. He didn't quite understand what Ji Tianqing was doing. However, he was filled with shock and disbelief. He opened his mouth silently and did not come back to his senses for a long time. It wasn't until a long time later that a cold sea breeze blew over that he shivered and woke up from his shock. No. Ji Tianqing had a problem. He used the divine thunderbolt to temper his body. Not only did he become extremely powerful, he could also control the power of thunder. Just now, he seemed to have used the power of thunder to open some kind of array and condense a gate of light. Then, he passed through the divine thunderbolt gate and disappeared along with the lightning. It's really strange. What is that kid trying to do? Where did he go after passing through that gate? Could it be that he escaped from under my nose just like that? Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes frowned and muttered to himself angrily. He couldn't figure it out no matter how hard he thought. His heart was filled with hatred and killing intent, as well as deep shock and doubt. However, he still remained calm and focused on thinking. He analyzed all kinds of clues and wanted to find the truth. Legend has it that the Nine Heavens platform not only has great danger and terror, but also great opportunities and fortuitous encounters that can allow one to reach the heavens in a single step. Ji Tianqing had to endure the divine thunderbolt's attack, which was extremely dangerous and terrifying. However, after passing through the divine thunderbolt gate, he mysteriously disappeared. Could it be that he obtained a great opportunity? When he thought of this, old ancestor 3 Absolutes was burning with jealousy and was about to go crazy. It would be fine if he didn't know about this, but it happened right under his nose. He watched with his own eyes but was powerless to stop it. How could he not be angry to the point of vomiting blood? After hesitating for a while, he finally made up his mind. No. With my strength and methods, I can't stop Ji Tianqing, let alone unravel the secret of the Nine Heavens platform. Now that he and that divine sword have disappeared, I can't get it anymore. Since I can't get it, then I must destroy him and that divine sword. At this point, old ancestor 3 Absolutes revealed a cold smile, and his eyes became ferocious and bloodthirsty. I'm going to inform that person. As an Essence Soul Realm expert, he will definitely be interested in the divine sword and the Nine Heavens platform. With that, he took out a communication jade slip from his interspatial ring. After inputting a message into the jade slip, he released it. Whoosh! The communication jade simplified into a spiritual light and flew high into the sky, disappearing. After sending the message, old ancestor 3 Absolutes waited with a cold smile on his face, watching the Nine Heavens platform closely. At the same time, Ji Tianqing saw a blur in front of his eyes, and he arrived in a foreign space. That's right, it was a space, not a continent or a world. The scene that he saw was completely different from what he had imagined. Beneath his feet and all around him was darkness. There was nothing there, just a pitch-black and cold void. There was neither air nor spiritual chi of heaven and earth in the void. There were no living creatures in the void. The extremely cold temperature could freeze a soul-level Dharma treasure into powder and instantly freeze a soul refinement realm expert to death. Only Essence Soul Realm experts who had surpassed the soul refinement realm could survive in this void. Fortunately, although Ji Tianqing was not in the Essence Soul realm, he was comparable to a half-step Essence Soul Realm expert. Moreover, his body and soul had been tempered by the Nine Heavens' divine thunder and were unimaginably powerful. He could move freely in the void, but he could not stay there for too long. The dermic powers in his body were being depleted at a rapid rate. According to his estimation, he could last for at most 10 days in the void before exhausting all his dermic powers. At that time, only death would await him. Understanding this, he remained calm and collected, observing the scene around him. It didn't take long for him to make out that this void was like a huge and long canyon, but it also looked like a wide crack. A crack in the void? I thought that after passing through the divine thunderbolt gate, I would reach the Shenwu continent. Ji Tianqing muttered in disappointment and quietly analyzed. The burial of heaven once said that the continents in this world were sealed by the gods and were not connected to each other. However, after tens of thousands of years, the seals between the continents have loosened, and cracks have appeared. If that's the case, then this huge and narrow void is the crack in the god seal. As this thought flashed through his mind, the burial of heaven's deep voice rang out in his mind. Your guess is correct, but it's not accurate enough. Chapter 13:11. Ji Tianqing only had 10 days. After 10 days, his power would be exhausted, and his life would be in danger. In order to conserve his magic power, he stepped on the burial of heaven's sword and flew in the void. After observing, he found that this crack in the sky was at least 10,000 miles wide. As for the length of the crack, it seemed to be endless. After 4 hours, he had flown for tens of thousands of miles in the dark void. At this moment, he suddenly saw that in the darkness ahead, there was a light. Looking from afar, it seemed to be a gigantic ball of light, like a bright moon. However, that ball of light was not white, but blue with green and yellow light. It was a riot of colors. What is that? Ji Tianqing's spirit was shaken. His eyes were filled with doubt and anticipation. No one could answer him, and the burial of heaven was also silent. He sped up and flew over, wanting to get closer to see what was going on. This crack in the sky, and everything in the void, was unfamiliar and mysterious to him. He flew on his sword for half a day before arriving at the gigantic ball of light. When he got closer, he could see clearly that it was a circular ball of light with a radius of 1,000 miles. The gigantic ball of light was rotating slowly, and it constantly flashed with dense brilliance. Ji Tianqing stopped and carefully observed the ball of light. He saw that there were many patterns on the surface of the ball of light, which were made up of 3 colors, blue, green, and dark yellow. The blue patterns were the most numerous, occupying about 60% of the entire ball of light. The dark yellow patterns were next, occupying about 30% of the ball of light. The remaining 10% of the ball of light was mostly green patterns. The patterns made up of these 3 colors divided the ball of light into more than a dozen areas of various sizes. Ji Tianqing looked up at the ball of light, and after a moment of observation, he suddenly thought of something and came to a realization. I understand now. The patterns on this ball of light seem to be a topographic map. The blue areas represent the ocean, the dark yellow areas represent the land, and the green areas are forests. After understanding this, he frowned even more suspiciously. At least 60% of the entire map is the ocean, and the other 30% of the land is also divided into 5 pieces, like 5 islands. Where is this map from? The ruins of the Eastern Sea? Or the profound sky continent? He pondered for a long time but still couldn't figure it out. A bold idea vaguely appeared in his mind, but he didn't dare to confirm it. At this moment, he suddenly saw that the huge ball of light floating above his head had become extremely dazzling. Furthermore, the pitch-black void on both sides of the sky fissure lit up with a silvery white brilliance. The dazzling silver-white light hung in the void like a 1,000-mile-tall light screen. The curtain of light continued to extend forward, as if it was endless. It was like a silver beam of light, tearing apart the pitch-black void. Ji Tianqing flew forward on his sword, but his eyes were fixed on the huge screen of light. The silver light screen flowed slowly like flowing water, and a vast image appeared in it. The first thing that entered his eyes was a green scene. In the picture was a vast grassland. The ground was covered with waist-high green grass, as well as all kinds of small flowers and trees. At the end of the vast grassland stood an ancient city. There was a moat around the city, and under the tall city gate, there were armored soldiers guarding it. On the majestic city wall, there were not only guards, but also ballistas and catapults. As Ji Tianqing flew forward, he saw the picture flowing and changing slowly. He saw the scene in the city again. There were countless commoners and merchants in plain clothes moving about in the city. There were many martial artists with swords and sabers on their backs moving about in the city. Ji Tianqing felt that this scene was somewhat familiar. He continued to fly forward for more than 1,000 miles and saw many similar scenes. There were more than a dozen cities, dozens of mountains, and the ground in front of him. He sharply discovered that the scenes in the mountains and cities were very similar to the scenes in the central state. The commoners in the picture were dressed in the style of the central state, and the architectural style of the houses in the city was exactly the same as the central state. Next, he continued to fly on his sword in the void. The silver light screen was endless, and the scenes in it were also flowing and changing slowly. He also saw many scenes of different styles. There were bleak deserts, dark brown barren mountains, and countless rugged buildings and cities. There were many demons wearing animal skins and bones as decorations. Without a doubt, these scenes were of the Western Barren Demon clan. There was a white world of ice and snow, many mountains covered in pure white snow, and some tall demons with dark or dark purple skin appeared in the picture. These were the scenes of the Northern Desert Demon clan. When he saw this, Ji Tianqing had already flown tens of thousands of miles in the void. Although he was extremely shocked, he had to confirm his previous guess. That's right, these scenes were the scenes of the Tianxian land. He was finally sure that the topographic map on the giant light ball should be a miniature of the entire world. Previously, he thought that there were 5 islands on the map. Now, he realized that they were not islands, but 5 continents. This way, that giant light ball is a miniature of the entire world. The topographic map on the light ball corresponds to the topography of the entire world. In this world, 60% of the area was ocean, 30% was land, and it was divided into 5 vast continents. The Tianxian land is just one of the 5 continents, and it's located in a corner of the world. Of the 5 continents, the middle one is the largest, and it's twice as large as the Tianxian land. Could the largest continent be the legendary Shenwu continent? Ji Tianqing was filled with shock, and he gained a new understanding of this world. At the same time, he also understood that this world was actually a planet, and the endless ocean and the 5 continents were all on this planet. This is too inconceivable. Even a primordial spirit realm cultivator would be trapped on a continent and unable to leave, let alone a spirit refinement realm cultivator. Who could overlook the entire world and treat it as a planet, overlooking the endless ocean and the 5 continents? Apart from the gods, who else could have such lofty vision and astounding courage? That light ball is definitely a miracle. Ji Tianqing had known for a long time that a martial artist's martial path was actually a process of understanding the world and becoming one with it. The stronger a martial artist was, the deeper their understanding of the world and the heavens would be. Only a powerhouse who had reached the deity realm could transcend this world and explore the endless galaxies. He had not yet reached the primordial spirit realm, but he had already come into contact with too many secrets and had a deep understanding of the entire world. Chapter 13:12. Ji Tianqing controlled the sword of burial of heaven and continued to fly forward in the void. After a whole day, he finally finished watching the scene of the Tianxian continent. Then, a strange scene appeared on the huge light screen. It was a vast and boundless continent. There was a primitive forest that had existed for tens of millions of years. In it stood towering ancient trees that were thousands of meters tall. Dark blue-green wood genuine qi was steaming. In the forest, there were mountain-like shrubs and vines that had lived for tens of millions of years and turned into demons. They entrenched themselves in the forest like living creatures, capturing birds and beasts for food. There were also many strange and huge beasts that shuttled back and forth in the forest like lightning. There was a giant python that was thousands of meters tall that was about to turn into a dragon after devouring the essence of the moon. There was an ancient giant beast the size of a mountain that could crush a mountain peak with 1 step and break a river with 2 palms. It was earth-shattering. There were also giant birds that could cover the sky and the sun when they spread their wings. They glided across the sky and brought up hurricanes that destroyed hundreds of miles of forest. There were birds and beasts of various colors and shapes. They all had the power to summon the wind and rain and fight the sun and moon. They were unimaginably powerful. After passing through the forest, there was a vast and endless mountain range. Each mountain range was hundreds of millions of miles long. Among them, there were giant peaks that were tens of thousands of meters tall that were shrouded in white clouds and thick fog. Countless powerful demons and beasts shuttled and chased each other between the mountains. Above the vast clouds, there were many ancient and majestic cities built on the peaks of the mountains. Those cities were built on the mountains. The terrain was steep and contained a domineering aura that overlooked the world. The architectural style of the city was also very special. It had a very ancient and sacred aura. There were almost no weak mortals living in the city. Basically, all of the people living in the city were martial artists. Most of the martial artists had amazing strength. They could lift thousands of kilograms of boulders and logs with one hand. Even if these martial artists were not in the sky origin stage, they were not far from it. All the ancient cities were located on the peaks of the mountains and were not connected to each other. Those people came and went with each other. Some of them used vital essence to form wings and flew in the sky like birds. Some of them sat on various flying artifacts. Some were like boats, some were like flying boats, and some were like roulette wheels. However, what Ji Tianqing saw the most was a flying Dharma artifact that was similar to a throne. He flew continuously for 30,000 miles, and this was all he saw. His heart was filled with shock and astonishment. He was certain that the continent in the picture was not the Tian Xian land. On the Tian Xian land, it was rare to see such gigantic and valiant demonic birds and beasts, not to mention such ancient and majestic mountaintop cities. But for the time being, he still couldn't tell which continent it was. Therefore, he patiently continued to fly forward, carefully observing the scene on the screen. One after another, new and unfamiliar scenes appeared clearly in front of his eyes. 8 snow-white single-horned heavenly horses with wings were pulling a luxurious golden carriage with a radius of 100 meters, flying across the sky at lightning speed. The golden carriage was extremely luxurious. It was completely golden and resplendent, and it emitted a divine and dignified aura. It didn't seem like something from the mortal world at all. Around the golden carriage, there were hundreds of beautiful young women. They were either carrying baskets of flowers or various musical instruments. Along the way, fresh flowers floated in the air, and string music played together. When the sacred golden carriage flew to the mountaintop and arrived above an ancient city, the hundreds of thousands of people in the city all knelt down and bowed in worship. Their attitudes were extremely respectful and pious. Within the golden carriage, there was a white jade arm waving her slender hand. A resplendent golden light scattered in the ancient city. Instantly, the ancient city was filled with dazzling golden light, as if it had turned into a perfect golden world. On the ground, spring grass sprouted, green trees bloomed, and all kinds of spiritual herbs grew wildly. Hundreds of spiritual beasts also grew rapidly. The hundreds of thousands of martial artists and civilians cheered as if they were bathed in the spring breeze. Subtle changes occurred to their bodies, and their strength was greatly increased. Originally, in the towering mountains below the ancient city, there were tens of thousands of demonic beasts gathered. However, when the golden light that covered the sky scattered and spread among the mountains, it instantly drove away countless demonic beasts, causing them to retreat in fear. Those who didn't dodge in time and were touched by the resplendent golden light, would collapse and disintegrate. Not long after, this image dissipated. Next, Ji Tianqing witnessed many hair-raising, thrilling, and bizarre scenes with his own eyes. 2 valiant experts with powerful and noble auras were fighting each other in the sky. Both of them didn't use Dharma treasures, but with a raise of their hands, they captured dozens of mountains and used them as hidden weapons to attack each other. The shockwaves from the battle turned the land within 1,000 miles into ruins. Countless rivers collapsed and changed their course. Even with a wave of their sleeves, endless heavenly fire poured down and scorched the mountains and rivers within 1,000 miles. Such a hair-raising battle and the earth-shaking power of the Dharma spells shocked Ji Tianqing greatly. He couldn't help but exclaim. Heavens, just how terrifying is the strength of these 2 powerhouses. Even primordial soul realm supremes may not be able to destroy thousands of miles of land with a raise of their hands like this, right? Having seen too many similar scenes, he was already a little numb from the shock. At this moment, there was only one thought in his mind. This continent is even more vast than the Tianxian continent. The terrain is even more lofty and steep, and the cities are even more ancient. The birds, beasts, and ordinary people here are several times stronger than those on the Tianxian continent. There are even many warriors who have surpassed the primordial soul realm. It seems that these scenes are of the Shenwu continent. I haven't even entered the Shenwu continent, but I'm already able to see the scene of the Shenwu continent through that ball of light and the 2 screens. It's too amazing. Ji Tianqing was both shocked and excited. He was filled with anticipation for the vast, mysterious, and powerful Shenwu continent. Ever since he had learned of its existence, his goal had been to enter the Shenwu continent. This was because the burial of heaven had said that the 5 continents of this world had all sorts of seals and shackles. Only on the Shenwu continent would one not be restricted, and there would be a chance for one to reach the deity realm. However, that chance was very slim, and there were only a handful of warriors who could reach the deity realm. Still, it was better than being trapped on the Tianxian continent without any hope of ever becoming a deity. Ji Tianqing knew that there would come a day when he would enter the Shenwu continent and pursue the deity realm. Thus, he wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to understand the situation of the Shenwu continent in advance. Thus, he tirelessly flew on his sword into the depths of the void, constantly watching the scenes on the screens along the way. For 3 whole days, millions of images appeared on the screens, all of which were bizarre and variegated. It wasn't until the 4th day that the images on the screens changed to that of another continent. The scenes on this continent were completely different from the Shenwu continent, and they were also very different from the Tianxian continent. Chapter 13:13. Over the next 2 days, Ji Tianqing saw images of another continent. This continent's topography was very peculiar, and most of the land was covered in forests. All sorts of strange intelligent races lived in the forests, and they built all sorts of cities and houses, creating a prosperous civilization. However, after observing for half a day, Ji Tianqing discovered that although this continent's landscape was peculiar, it was still as ordinary and low-level as the Tianxian continent. Most of the creatures living on this continent were ordinary people. Spirit refinement realm powerhouses were the peak, and primordial spirit realm powerhouses were considered supreme. Because of this, Lu Yin no longer had any interest in observing the 5th continent. In any case, he already had a rough idea of the situation in this world. Aside from the Shenwu continent, which was the largest continent and where the martial path was the most prosperous, the other 4 continents, including the Tianxian continent, were rather backward and ignorant. After all, these continents had been sealed by the gods and were shackled by invisible shackles. All in all, Ji Tianqing had his own thoughts and came to a conclusion. Although this world is vast and boundless, the 4 continents are very ordinary. Only the Shenwu continent is the most prosperous, and there's hope of reaching the deity realm. It's not just the Tianxian continent, the powerhouses of the other 4 low-level continents probably want to leave their own continents and enter the Shenwu continent to pursue the peak of the martial path. Now that he had a goal to strive for, he no longer considered this problem. This was because he had unknowingly fallen into a predicament. There was a problem that he needed to solve as soon as possible. I've already been in the heavens fissure for 6 days, and I'll have at most 4 or 5 more days before my strength is exhausted. At that time, I won't be able to survive in the void. But where should I go from here? Should I take this opportunity to enter the Shenwu continent or return to the 9 heavens platform? If I want to go to the Shenwu continent, where should I go? If I want to return to the 9 heavens platform, can I go back the way I came? Many questions filled his mind, causing him to frown. Unfortunately, the burial of heaven had remained silent, and Lu Yin did not know what it was doing or what it was thinking. After pondering for a while, he could only make a decision. There's nothing in the void besides that ball of light and the 2 screens. If I want to enter this place, it's most likely related to the ball of light and the screens. I'll give it a try first. Thus, he controlled the sword of burial of heaven and flew toward the light screen. An hour later, he came to the mysterious and dazzling light screen and observed it closely. On the dazzling light screen, the image of an ordinary continent was still being displayed, and it was slowly moving. After careful observation, Ji Tianqing discovered that the light curtain was formed by silver flowing light, as if a water curtain was pouring down from above. He tried to reach out his right hand and condensed a golden palm to touch the silver light screen. As a result, as soon as the golden palm touched the light screen rippled like water, and many ripples spread out in all directions. The image on the light screen also became blurry. When the ripples dissipated, the light screen returned to normal, and a new image appeared. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing suddenly frowned and said with some disappointment, "Such a mysterious light curtain, but I can't see any trace of a formation, let alone understand the mystery." It seemed that it was impossible to leave the void through the light screen. "At least, with my current strength and experience, I can't do it," he muttered to himself and frowned as he stared at the light screen, somewhat distressed. At this moment, he suddenly discovered that the light screen rippled again, and circles of ripples spread out. The image that had just appeared on the light screen was suddenly disrupted and became blurry. I haven't touched the light screen yet, why is this happening?" He immediately revealed a look of surprise and stared at the light screen full of ripples, waiting to see what would happen. In the next moment, he saw with his own eyes that the image on the light screen had completely disappeared. The light screen in a radius of 1,000 meters became abnormally calm, like a transparent mirror. Through this huge mirror, he saw that behind the mirror, there was a throne gilded with spiritual jade. The throne was very spacious, and it was in the shape of a semicircle, more than 6 meters wide. The throne was like a half-moon, and its shape was very exquisite and beautiful. It was dazzling with gold and jade, and it exuded a noble and sacred aura. Ji Tianqing was certain that even the thrones of Emperor Golden Dragon and a human imperial lord weren't as noble and gorgeous as this throne. He couldn't imagine how many rare treasures had been used to create such a sacred throne. What realm did the craftsman who made this throne reach? Most importantly, what kind of strength and realm was worthy of this throne? Ninth Tribulation Realm? Sage Realm? Or a deity realm expert? With these questions in mind, his gaze landed on the throne as he carefully observed it. Then, when he saw the figure sitting on the throne, he was dumbfounded. This was because the figure sitting on the throne was actually a petite little girl. The girl's figure and appearance were very similar to humans. She was about 1 meter tall and wore a red dress. She was sitting leisurely on the throne with her bare feet and calves. Her face was fair and tender, and it was as red as an apple. Her palm-sized face was round and looked extremely cute. One couldn't help but want to reach out and pinch it. Her mouth was petite and pink, and her nose was small and cute. However, she had a pair of extremely clear and clean eyes. She was a little different from humans. Her long hair was pale golden, and she wore hair clips and hair accessories. Her pupils were also golden. However, it was undeniable that this was an extremely beautiful little girl that anyone would love. She was just too cute. Ji Tianqing dared to swear that this little girl was definitely not more than 10 years old. She was only 8 or 9 years old. He would never have imagined that on such a sacred and honorable throne, there was actually an 8 or 9-year-old little girl sitting there. This was simply too shocking. When Ji Tianqing stared at the little girl with his mouth agape, the little girl also widened her clear and bright eyes and stared at him through the mirror. Their eyes met, and both of them were stunned. They sized each other up with strange gazes. Moments later, Ji Tianqing came to his senses and greeted the little girl first. "This, little girl, hello. May I know who you are?" He was a little hesitant and embarrassed. He didn't know how to address the other party, nor did he know if the other party could understand his language. After he finished speaking, he discovered an even more awkward problem. Although he and the little girl were facing each other, and they were only 5 steps away from each other, there was a mysterious barrier between them. The two of them were separated by a mysterious mirror-like screen of light. Their voices couldn't be transmitted. I didn't expect to meet someone else in the rift. I was so excited that I forgot about this. Ji Tianqing immediately blushed with shame as he smiled awkwardly at the little girl. Chapter 13-14. Seeing that the little girl finally responded, Ji Tianqing couldn't help but smile. In particular, the little girl's eyes were clear and pure, full of innocence, which warmed his heart. Even though he had never met the little girl before, but as the saying goes, one's appearance was born from one's heart. Such a cute little girl couldn't be a bad person. Moreover, there was a mysterious light screen between the two of them. He pondered silently, thinking about how to communicate with the little girl. He really wanted to know, on the other side of the mysterious light screen, where was the little girl's space? Which race was the little girl, which continent was she from? Why was she here? He quickly thought of a way, using his hands to make different gestures, and match them with specific body movements, to communicate with the little girl. Unfortunately, the little girl couldn't understand his body language at all, and was even amused by his slightly comical appearance, giggling. Seeing the little girl giggling, Ji Tianqing felt even more awkward, and hurriedly stopped. At this time, the little girl stopped giggling, slowly stretched out her small white hand, and pressed it on the mysterious light screen. When her palm touched the light screen, it was as if she was pressing on water, and layers of ripples appeared around her palm. Then, she stared at Ji Tianqing, and gestured with her other hand. Ji Tianqing immediately understood what she meant, and slowly stretched out his right hand, and pressed it on the mysterious light screen. Suddenly, an invisible mysterious force wrapped around his palm. That force was a little cold, but it was undeniably powerful, like the majesty of a god, and couldn't be resisted. Ji Tianqing was puzzled, what was the little girl trying to do? In the next moment, he felt a slight warmth in his palm, and when he looked, he realized that the little girl's chubby little hand had touched his palm. Two palms, one big and one small, were tightly pressed together. Then, an invisible soul fluctuation came from the little girl's palm, and a cute child's voice sounded in Ji Tianqing's mind. "Young hero, may I ask where you are from, and where are you going?" Without a doubt, this was the little girl's soul transmission. Her voice was as clear and cute as a 9-year-old girl's. However, her tone was slightly solemn, and her words also had a kind of ancient and experienced charm. Ji Tianqing was stunned for a moment. Obviously, he was not used to a little girl talking to him in such an elder tone. In his opinion, the other party was like a child pretending to be mature, making him unable to restrain his laughter. However, after staring at the little girl for a while, he realized that the little girl was looking at him expectantly. Her expression was quite serious, and she didn't seem to be joking. Therefore, he also answered seriously, "I came from the Tianxian land and accidentally entered this place. I don't know how to get out." When the little girl heard his soul transmission, she immediately pouted and frowned. She said with some displeasure, "You're lying. The fluctuations of your soul have betrayed your heart. You clearly intended to break into this place and explore some secrets." Ji Tianqing's body suddenly shook, and he asked in disbelief, "Hey, you can actually pry into other people's minds? So you admit that you're lying?" The little girl's lips curled into a mocking smile, with a hint of slyness. It was only then that Ji Tianqing realized that the little girl was trying to trick him. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and he said, "Little girl, it's fate that we were able to meet here. Can't you treat me with sincerity, less tricks, and more sincerity?" The little girl immediately giggled. "You're really interesting." Ji Tianqing only smiled and did not reply. The little girl took the initiative to ask, "Right, what kind of place is the Tianxian land?" The Tianxian land is located in a very distant place, and it's surrounded by oceans. Ji Tianqing gave a simple explanation before asking, "What about you? Where are you from?" The little girl roughly understood what he meant, and she replied sincerely, "Me? I come from the Shenwu continent's Taihao divine kingdom, and I'm a citizen of the martial god Taihao." When he heard this, Ji Tianqing's expression changed, and his eyes revealed a look of astonishment. Shenwu continent? She really is from the Shenwu continent. No wonder the throne she's sitting on is so similar to the flying treasures of the Shenwu continent. As this thought flashed through his mind, his emotions became somewhat agitated, and he hurriedly asked, "Little girl, I've only heard of the legends of the Shenwu continent, but I've never seen it for myself. Can you tell me what the Shenwu continent is like? Also, what's the deal with the Taihao Divine Kingdom and the martial god Taihao? The little girl pouted and frowned slightly. I'm much older than you, and I have a name. Don't call me little girl. In order to have a smooth conversation, Ji Tianqing decided to ignore the first half of her sentence and asked seriously, then I haven't asked, what's your name? The little girl revealed a warm smile and replied with some pride, my name is Jiu. What's your name? My name is Tianqing. Ji Tianqing answered the question honestly and then curiously asked, why are you called Jiu? Is there a surname like Jiu? Jiu did not seem to like this question and pouted at him. My surname isn't Jiu. It's just that I'm ranked 99 in my family, so I'm called Jiu. Ah. You're ranked 99 in your family? Ji Tianqing was stunned on the spot, and he said with a heart full of shock, then you must have a lot of siblings. Jiu nodded and agreed. Yes, I have a total of 99 siblings, and I'm the youngest one. Fortunately, my mother told me that 99 would be as good as one's wishes, and she didn't want to have any more children. Otherwise. Halfway through her sentence, Jiu seemed to be afraid of spilling the beans, so she did not continue. Even so, Ji Tianqing still understood what she was saying, and he immediately felt deep admiration for Jiu's parents. This couple had been able to give birth to 99 children. They were truly powerful. Jiu could tell that he was thinking nonsense, and she pouted unhappily. Hey, Tianqing, you're not allowed to think nonsense, and you're not allowed to make fun of me. Yes, of course not. Ji Tianqing hurriedly nodded with a serious expression as he guaranteed her. Jiu finally relaxed and continued, since you've never been to Shenwu continent, I'll give you a rough idea. Shenwu continent is vast and boundless. I've traveled all over the continent since I was young, but I haven't explored the entire continent yet. There are 3 divine kingdoms on the continent, the Boundless Divine Kingdom, the Absolute Heaven Divine Kingdom, and the Luoshui Divine Kingdom. These 3 kingdoms have existed for nearly 10,000 years. All of the living beings on the continent are under the jurisdiction of these 3 divine kingdoms. The 3 kingdoms restrict each other, but they also assist each other. In short, it's very complicated. Of the 3 divine kingdoms, the safest and most harmonious one is our boundless divine kingdom. Chapter 13-15. When Jiu mentioned martial god Taihao, her face was filled with reverence and admiration, and all sorts of praises flowed endlessly. Ji Tianqing's teeth ached as he listened, and he thought to himself, although the legendary martial god is revered and admired, it shouldn't be this exaggerated, right? This Jiu must be a fanatic worshipper of martial god Taihao. After Jiu finished speaking, he revealed a polite smile and praised, hearing you speak so sincerely, it seems that martial god Taihao is a great talent of his generation and a benevolent ruler. Jiu puffed out her chest proudly and nodded repeatedly. Of course. Father. Everyone knows of the martial god's fame. Ji Tianqing hurriedly changed the topic and asked, what about Tianju and Luoshui god nations? Jiu lost interest in these 2 god nations and only gave a brief introduction. Tianju nation is in the eastern region, and its master is martial god Tianju. It's said that he's the most handsome man in the world and is extremely proud and mysterious. As for Luoshui god nation, it's in the northern region of the continent, and its master is martial god Luoshui, who is known as the most beautiful woman in the world. The most handsome man in the world? The most beautiful woman in the world? Ji Tianqing immediately frowned, and his expression became a little strange. He muttered to himself, could it be that to become a martial god and rule a god nation, one has to look at one's appearance? When he thought of this, he couldn't help but look down at himself and think to himself, with my appearance, I might have a chance in the future, At this time, Jiu saw that he was distracted and asked, Tianqing, I've already said so much and told you the truth about the Shenwu continent. You have to be honest and tell me why you're here. Why did you barge into Xian Pin Gate? Xian Pin Gate? Tianqing frowned, puzzled by this unfamiliar term. Jiu nodded and said seriously, the grain god did not die because of Xian Pin. Xian Pin Gate is the root of heaven and earth, and it doesn't need to be used frequently. This is a legend from ancient times, and you won't understand the specifics. All you need to know is that the Xian Pin Gate is talking about this place. After saying that, she pointed at the dark void behind her and the mysterious light screen between them. Tianqing nodded as if he understood, and explained, I was originally a martial artist from the profound sky continent. I was limited by the shackles of heaven and earth, and even though I had exceptional talent for cultivation, I had no hope of reaching the peak of martial arts. Thus, I searched with all my might, traversing the entire continent before I found a dangerous place. I risked my life to enter this place because I wanted to find a way to leave the Tianxian continent and enter the Shenwu continent. Jiu listened very seriously. Her big clear eyes were filled with surprise. She said in disbelief, you actually know these secrets? How did you know? I can't tell you that. Tianqing shook his head and looked at her apologetically. Jiu did not blame him, and she simply nodded in understanding. It's fine if it's not convenient for you to reveal this information. Also, if you want to enter the Shenwu continent, you'll have to go through this screen. When you see the scene of the Shenwu continent on the screen, you'll be able to enter. However, you'll need to reach the primordial spirit realm before you can enter, or else you'll be turned to dust. Also, you must look carefully before you enter. If you end up in the territories of the Heaven End Divine Nation or the Luoshui Divine Nation, you'll be all alone. After saying that, she gave Tianqing a kind smile. Tianqing understood what she meant, and he smiled. Jiu, you mean, you're willing to be friends with me? You want me to go to the Taihao Divine Nation when I enter the Shenwu continent? Jiu nodded, and her big clear eyes revealed a look of admiration. That's right. You're very smart, and you're also a very interesting fellow. You're also very cute. Tianqing chuckled and asked, right, Jiu, you still haven't told me why you're here. Could it be that you want to leave the Shenwu continent and head to other continents? Jiu shook her head, and her big clear eyes looked around before she answered, I've never thought of leaving the Shenwu continent. Our Taihao Divine Nation is so harmonious and friendly, so why would I want to leave? I'm just in a hurry to rush to the Clear Sky Pagoda to participate in the God-Disciple selection that happens once every 20 years. However, I lost my way halfway there and accidentally stumbled into this place. Then, I met a silly fellow like you. Lost your way? Tianqing's eyes widened in disbelief, and he secretly cursed in his heart, a little girl who can get lost actually dares to call me silly. Who's the silly one here? Of course, he knew that Jiu's words were half true and half false, so he couldn't believe them completely. However, he didn't delve into it, and he only asked the key question. Jiu, what's the God-Disciple selection all about? Jiu patiently answered him and calmly said, the God-Disciple selection is a grand event of the Taihao Divine Nation, and it's held once every 20 years. This time, the God-Disciple selection will begin in 8 months. When the time comes, all the young fighters in the Divine Nation will have to go through layers of battles and selections. The final 100 young talents who emerge victorious will head to the sacred Clear Sky Pagoda to undergo the final selection. The young talents who are successfully selected will become God disciples with honorable statuses. They will bask in the divine light of the Divine Master and grow up healthily and steadily. If they have outstanding talent and strength, they might even gain the Divine Master's favor and be entrusted with important tasks and rewards. As for the young talents who aren't selected, they can only serve as God's servants. Jiu was still somewhat childish, and her words were rather interesting, but she was also somewhat vague. However, Ji Tianqing could roughly guess that the so-called god-disciple selection was actually just like the imperial concubine selection in the secular world. After the new emperor ascended the throne, he would send people to search for beauties all over the world. He would pick out a few hundred of the most outstanding ones and send them to the palace for the emperor to choose from. Those who caught the emperor's eye would be conferred various positions in the imperial harem and concubines. As for those who did not catch the emperor's eye, they could only stay in the palace as maidservants. After Ji Tianqing finished chatting with Jiu about the god-disciple selection, he asked her about the Taihao divine nation. The more they talked, the happier they became, and their relationship became closer. Their hands were pressed together, unwilling to let go, and they even forgot about the passage of time. Unknowingly, half a day had passed. Ji Tianqing had more or less asked all the questions he wanted to ask. Only then did he wake up from a dream and remember an important matter. Currently, he could not go to the Xinwu continent, and he had to return to the Tianxian continent as soon as possible. He did not have much time left, and he had to leave this pitch-black void, which was also the Xian Pin Gate, before his strength was exhausted. Otherwise, when his strength was exhausted, the consequences would be unimaginable. In the future, when he reached the primordial spirit realm and resolved his grudges in the Tianxian continent, he would be able to come here again and head to the Xinwu continent. Chapter 13-16. Ji Tianqing saw that it was about time, so he bid farewell to Jiu. Jiu, it's my fortune to have met you here. Thank you for telling me so much, but I can't head to Xinwu continent for the time being. I have to return to the Tianxian continent first, as there are still many things that I need to take care of. Jiu knew that he was about to leave, and a trace of reluctance flashed through her clear eyes. She had not chatted enough, as she still wanted to learn more about the situation in the Tianxian continent from Ji Tianqing. However, she suppressed these thoughts and sincerely said to Ji Tianqing, Tianqing, after today's parting, I don't know when we will meet again. If you can reach Xinwu continent within 8 months, I hope that you can come to the vast divine kingdom and find me at the Clear Sky Pagoda. Ji Tianqing smiled and nodded. All right, if possible, I will try my best to rush over. I wish you success in passing the selection and becoming a respected god's disciple. Jiu was stunned, but she did not say anything. She only smiled and thanked him. Ji Tianqing waved goodbye to her and then controlled the burial of heaven to fly back. Jiu slowly retracted her small, white hand and looked through the screen at his back as he left. Her lips curled up into a smile. Humph, that silly guy actually thinks that I'm going to become a god's disciple. Too stupid. She muttered to herself in a somewhat reproachful tone as her eyes stared at Ji Tianqing's back, unwilling to leave for a long time. After a long time, when Ji Tianqing's figure disappeared into the darkness, she finally retracted her gaze. She suddenly remembered something important, and her smile disappeared as she muttered to herself, in the past 1,000 years, this guy is the first person to enter Xian Pin door without reaching the primordial spirit realm. This Tianqing is definitely a peerless genius that only appears once in 1,000 years. Even in our vast divine kingdom, he can be considered a first-rate youth genius. I have to hurry back and report this news to father so that Tianqing won't be snatched away by another god's master when he comes to Xinwu continent. Jiu hurriedly controlled the gilded throne and flew away at lightning speed. Ji Tianqing controlled the burial of heaven and flew back with all his might. He had already consumed more than half of his strength, and he only had 4 days left. He focused on flying and didn't look at the mysterious screens of light on both sides of the void of space. Burial of heaven was silent for a long time. Suddenly, he sent a voice transmission, Tianqing, that little girl is not simple. Ji Tianqing was in a hurry when he heard burial of heaven's sudden words. He was startled. Soon after, he came back to his senses and said with a smile, of course. She looks like she's only 8 or 9 years old, yet she was able to enter the door of Xian Pin. She definitely has the strength of the primordial soul stage or above. Furthermore, she's from the Shenwu continent. If her parents dared to give birth to 99 children, then her family must be an aristocratic family with a deep foundation. Burial of Heaven was silent for a moment before speaking again. The poverty and backwardness of the profound sky continent has limited your imagination. Ji Tianqing frowned and unhappily said, "Are you saying that I'm a country bumpkin who hasn't seen the world?" Burial of Heaven did not reply, which was probably a tacit acknowledgement. Ji Tianqing thought to himself, although I've seen some images of the Shenwu continent on the screens, and I've also learned a bit about the situation there from Jiujiu. However, I've never been to the Shenwu continent before, so I don't understand it at all. Thus, I can't make any wild guesses. However, after I head to the Shenwu continent, I'll naturally be able to adapt to it and have a clearer understanding of it. In the future, I'll also be able to become a powerhouse on that continent, very quickly, for days past. Ji Tianqing's strength was about to be exhausted, but he still hadn't reached the end of the pitch-black void. Helpless, he could only enter Burial of Heaven and enter the Sword's world, where he took some pills and meditated to recover his magic power. Burial of Heaven continued to fly through the void for another day and night before finally reaching the end of the void. At the end of the darkness, there was an oval-shaped door of light. It was obviously a teleportation gate, and the other end was connected to the Nine Heavens platform. Burial of Heaven flew over without hesitation and entered the teleportation gate with a whoosh. 5 kilometers away from the Nine Heavens platform, Ancestor Triforce was standing in the sky above the sea. He had already put away the jade prayer mat and was now pacing back and forth in the sky. From time to time, he would look at the Nine Heavens platform, and from time to time, he would turn his head to look towards the southeast. His expression was somewhat anxious, and his expression was somewhat gloomy. That damned little bastard. He's already disappeared for 11 days, and he still hasn't appeared. He couldn't have really escaped, right? But what secrets does the Nine Heavens platform hold? Where does it lead to? Old Ancestor Sanju murmured to himself. His eyes were filled with hatred and killing intent. He turned his head to look towards the southeast sky and anxiously muttered to himself, "I've already sent the message 11 days ago. Why hasn't he come yet? He's a primordial spirit realm powerhouse, and he'll only need 2 or 3 days to get here." As time passed, Ancestor Triforce became more and more anxious. Not long after, a dazzling golden light suddenly appeared in the southeast sky. The golden light was like a sharp arrow piercing through the clouds, and also like lightning tearing through the sky. It sped over at an unimaginable speed. A moment ago, the golden light was still 300 kilometers away. A breath later, the golden light was already 100 kilometers away. Another breath later, the golden light that was more than 10 meters long had already arrived in front of Ancestor Triforce. The golden light stopped 1,000 meters away from him. After the dazzling light gradually dissipated, a tall and muscular figure appeared. This was a middle-aged man who was 10 meters tall and had a domineering and imposing aura. He wore a golden robe embroidered with phoenixes and dragons, and a noble 9-star crown on his head. His square face was upright and dignified, and his bell-sized eyes were deep and vast. The most eye-catching thing was the golden dragon horn protruding from his forehead. Clearly, this person was not a human, but a member of the imperial family of the Eastern Sea, the Golden Dragon clan. When Ancestor Triforce saw this person, he immediately let out a sigh of relief and joy appeared in his eyes. He hurriedly went forward with a face full of smiles. Even from 100 meters away, he respectfully clasped his hands and bowed, "Greetings, Your Majesty Dragon Emperor." "Your Majesty Dragon Emperor, ever since I sent the message, I've been waiting for your arrival. I've been looking left and right for a full 11 days, and you've finally arrived." Without a doubt, this person was the Emperor of the Water Race, the Golden Dragon Emperor. The Golden Dragon Emperor frowned when he saw how excited Ancestor Triforce was, as if he had seen his savior. He raised his hands, indicating for Ancestor Triforce to rise, and said in a dignified manner, "Ancestor Triforce, rise." Ever since we parted, you haven't visited this emperor in 100 years. In these past years, the tributes of the Heaven Ascension sect have been handed over by the juniors. Why did you suddenly send me a message and invite me to this dangerous forbidden area? Chapter 13-17. Although the Heaven Evasion sect was a human sect and was hidden deep within the Eastern Sea's ruins, the Eastern Sea's ruins was the Eastern Sea's ruins. However, the entire Eastern Sea was under the jurisdiction of the Water Race's imperial court. For the Heaven Evasion sect to be able to survive in the ruins of ruins for 3,000 years, they naturally had to rely on the Water Race's imperial court for permission and protection. Thus, every 10 years, the Heaven Evasion sect had to hand over a batch of priceless tributes to the Water Race's imperial court. Old ancestor Sanju and the Golden Dragon Emperor had known each other since 1,000 years ago. Although the relationship between the two was that of a ruler and a subject, the two of them didn't meet many times, so their relationship couldn't be considered close. However, the two of them still had some friendship, so the Golden Dragon Emperor was willing to give old ancestor Sanju face and come to the Nine Heavens platform. As soon as the two of them met, the Golden Dragon Emperor went straight to the point and asked about old ancestor Sanju's intentions. Old ancestor Sanju didn't beat around the bush and pointed at the Nine Heavens platform not far away, explaining, "Your Majesty Golden Dragon Emperor, the surprise I mentioned is on the Nine Heavens platform." The Golden Dragon Emperor was no stranger to the Nine Heavens platform and had come here several times in the past 1,000 years. However, he knew how mysterious and terrifying the Nine Heavens platform was and never dared to enter it. He had to be careful even when he approached the Nine Heavens platform. At this moment, he turned to look at the Nine Heavens platform and carefully observed it for a moment before asking with a frown, "There's nothing above the Nine Heavens platform and it's the same as usual. Where did the surprise come from?" Old ancestor Sanju revealed a playful smile and stroked his beard, "Your Majesty Golden Dragon Emperor, don't be anxious and listen to my explanation. 3 months ago, a bastard snuck into our sect and started a massacre. He killed our left and right protectors and many elders and deacons. I was cultivating in seclusion when the elders knocked on my door and woke me up. Thus, I brought the sect master and worked together to hunt that bastard down. We chased him all the way here." Progenitor Sanju briefly explained what had happened to Qin Nan. Of course, he didn't reveal the reason for the battle, nor did he mention Ji Tianqing's identity and name. He emphasized that Ji Tianqing had a divine black dragon divine beast and a peerless divine sword. Most importantly, after Ji Tianqing escaped to the Nine Heavens platform, not only was he not killed by the divine lightning, he even used the power of the divine lightning to temper his body, making him even more powerful. Even the Golden Dragon Emperor, who was knowledgeable, was dumbstruck by Patriarch Sanju's words. What? That person actually took the initiative to trigger the divine thunder of the ninth heaven. Even after being struck by the divine thunder, he can still cultivate and become stronger. Golden Dragon Emperor's eyes widened in shock as he stared intently at the Nine Heavens platform. Old ancestor Sanju nodded repeatedly and added fuel to the fire, "Your Highness Dragon Emperor, that kid has a divine beast, Black Dragon, but the Dragon clan is your people. How can they be enslaved by him? Moreover, the reason he was able to enter the Ninth Heaven platform and withstand the divine lightning was all thanks to the divine sword. That divine dragon and that divine sword should belong to you. Only a peerless sovereign and wise ruler like you is worthy of possessing such peerless divine items. Most importantly, in the thousands of years since ancient times, who has been able to decipher the secrets of the Nine Heavens platform? That kid was able to cultivate and become stronger in the Nine Heavens platform. He must have grasped the secrets of the Nine Heavens platform. If you can obtain this secret, you will be able to benefit the Water Clan." Old ancestor Sanju's words were undoubtedly very tempting. The Golden Dragon Emperor's blood was boiling, and his heart was filled with a strong desire and anticipation. But how wise was the Golden Dragon Emperor? How could he not see through old ancestor Sanju's intentions? He looked at old ancestor Sanju with a cold smile and said in a mocking tone, "Since this has already happened 3 months ago, why did you only inform me 10 days ago? You must have wanted to take the black dragon and the divine sword for yourself, but you couldn't do anything to that kid. You had no choice but to report this matter to me, right?" Old ancestor Sanju's face was filled with awkwardness. He smiled slightly and said humbly, "Your Highness Dragon Emperor's foresight is truly divine. You truly are the peerless sovereign of the East Sea." The Golden Dragon Emperor glanced at him indifferently and waved his hand. "Enough nonsense. Where is that kid now? The Nine Heavens platform is clearly empty." Old ancestor Sanju hurriedly explained, "This matter is even more mysterious. 11 days ago, that kid used the power of lightning to turn the entire Nine Heavens platform purple. After that, a huge teleportation gate appeared on the Nine Heavens platform. That kid entered the teleportation gate and disappeared." The Golden Dragon Emperor frowned and glared coldly at old ancestor Sanju. He said in a deep voice, "You dare to trick me? That kid must have left through the teleportation gate. He has already been gone for 11 days. What's the point of me coming here now?" This. Old ancestor Sanju saw that the Golden Dragon Emperor was angry and was filled with fear. He wanted to explain, but he was powerless. He racked his brain for a while and came up with a lame excuse. He hurriedly said, "Your Highness Dragon Emperor, none of us know the secrets of the Nine Heavens platform. This one guesses that the kid might have returned to the Nine Heavens platform. Even if he has already escaped far away, this matter is too mysterious. I will definitely have to report it to you. Only with your wisdom and talent can you unravel the mystery behind this. You old bastard." The Golden Dragon Emperor cursed. He wanted to reprimand him, but he didn't know where to start. After all, old ancestor Sanju's attitude was very respectful and he was flattering him. He was caught off guard. Right at that moment, the Nine Heavens platform suddenly flashed and a black light appeared. The Golden Dragon Emperor and old ancestor Sanju remained silent. They stared at the black light with sharp eyes and carefully observed it. In order to see it more clearly, the Golden Dragon Emperor flew to the pitch-black mountain peak and stood at the edge of the Nine Heavens platform. Old ancestor Sanju hurriedly followed and stood beside the Golden Dragon Emperor. He pointed at the mysterious black light and said excitedly, "Your Highness Dragon Emperor, look. It's that divine sword. It has finally appeared." The Golden Dragon Emperor stared at the black light and carefully examined it. Sure enough, he saw a 3-foot-long pitch-black treasured sword within the black light. He originally thought that when the treasured sword appeared, the Nine Heavens platform would react and send down a bolt of divine lightning. However, the Nine Heavens platform remained calm and tranquil. There was nothing out of the ordinary. The pitch-black treasured sword only stopped for a moment before flying into the sky like lightning. It crossed the bottomless abyss and flew into the distance. Seeing this, old ancestor Sanju anxiously shouted, "Your Highness Dragon Emperor, that's the divine sword. Quickly stop it. You mustn't let it escape." The Golden Dragon Emperor was also shocked. His eyes were filled with anticipation and his body flashed as he teleported over. After 2 breaths, the pitch-black treasured sword crossed the bottomless abyss and the pitch-black mountain peak and finally left the Nine Heavens platform. However, it was stopped by the Golden Dragon Emperor when it flew over the sea. Chapter 13:18. When the path of the burial of heaven was blocked, it turned around without hesitation and flew in the other direction. Whoosh! It was extremely fast. Like a black streak of light, it tore through the sky and flew 20 miles in an instant. Ancestor 3 Extinction chased after it with all his might, but he was left further and further behind. It was impossible for him to catch up in a short time. However, the Golden Dragon Emperor's methods were extraordinary. As expected of a nascent soul supreme. His figure flashed and turned into a streak of golden light, teleporting continuously in the sky. Whoosh! Whoosh whoosh! Every time the golden light flickered, he could cross 100 miles in the sky and teleport close to 100 miles away. Such terrifying speed was something the Sword of Burial of Heaven couldn't compare to. In just 3 short breaths, the Sword of Burial of Heaven was stopped by the Golden Dragon Emperor on the surface of the sea hundreds of miles away. Heaven-shaking claw! The Golden Dragon Emperor roared and raised his palm, sending out a golden light that covered the sky. It turned into a giant golden dragon claw that descended from the sky and grabbed at the Sword of Burial of Heaven. Suddenly, the space within a radius of dozens of miles was sealed by an invisible force. The Sword of Burial of Heaven's speed suddenly slowed, as if it had fallen into a quagmire. It struggled with all its might but couldn't escape. The golden dragon claw that blotted out the sky gradually closed in and was about to grab the Sword of Burial of Heaven. Ancestor 3 Extinction just happened to rush over and saw this scene. He was immediately filled with excitement and shouted emotionally, "Your Majesty Golden Dragon Emperor, that kid and the Divine Black Dragon are hiding in the Divine Sword." The Golden Dragon Emperor knew what was going on and used all his strength to capture and seal the Sword of Burial of Heaven. A moment later, the giant golden dragon claw slowly tightened and captured the Sword of Burial of Heaven. The Golden Dragon Emperor controlled the giant dragon claw to grab the Sword of Burial of Heaven and fly it back to him. The Sword of Burial of Heaven struggled with all its might, but it couldn't break free from the dragon claw. It could only give up for the time being. The Golden Dragon Emperor examined the Sword of Burial of Heaven at close range. He observed the material and patterns on the blade and felt the sword's aura. He immediately revealed a look of surprise. A peak top-grade soul weapon, a half-step divine artifact. A broken sword? Why was it a broken sword? If it was only a half-step divine artifact, how could it withstand the 9 heavens divine lightning without collapsing? No, there's something wrong with this broken sword. It's definitely a magical treasure that surpasses the primordial spirit realm. Previously, when the Golden Dragon Emperor heard Patriarch Sanju say that the sword was a divine artifact, he thought that it was a primordial spirit artifact. After all, at the Tian Xian land, primordial soul stage treasures were the top and publicly recognized divine weapons. However, he was experienced and knowledgeable. After observing the Sword of Burial of Heaven with his own eyes, he could tell that this sword was extraordinary. It was definitely not some primordial soul-level sword. When Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes heard his words, he hurriedly came over and looked at the Burial of Heaven with a greedy gaze. Of course, he lowered his head slightly to conceal the greed in his eyes, not daring to show it in front of the Golden Dragon Emperor. "Your Majesty Dragon Emperor, I've long noticed that this sword is extraordinary. It's a peerless divine sword. Now, you only need to kill that brat and you'll be able to obtain the divine sword and a divine black dragon." As Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes tempted the Golden Dragon Emperor and urged him to kill Ji Tianxing, he carefully observed the Golden Dragon Emperor's expression. Although the Golden Dragon Emperor did not understand the situation, he would not be blinded by joy. He saw through Old Ancestor 3 Absolute's intentions and said indifferently, "As for how to deal with this divine sword and the black dragon, I'll decide. There's no need for you to tell me what to do. This matter ends here. I'm going to take the divine sword back to the imperial court. You can leave now." Ah! Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes was stunned and cursed in his heart, "Damn you, Golden Dragon Emperor. You're burning the bridge after crossing the river and chasing me away after obtaining the divine sword. This won't do. I have to see him kill Ji Tianxing before I can be at ease." Seeing that Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes was unwilling to leave, the Golden Dragon Emperor comforted him again, "Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes, I appreciate your kindness. The Imperial Court owes you a favor. If you encounter any difficulties in the future or if your life is in danger, I promise to save your life. How about it?" After receiving the Golden Dragon Emperor's promise, Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes felt much better. He hurriedly bowed and said, "Thank you, Your Majesty." The Golden Dragon Emperor ignored him and turned to leave. However, at this moment, the burial of heaven flashed and a figure appeared out of thin air. Whoosh! This was a young man in a white robe. He appeared in the sky without any warning and stood in front of the Golden Dragon Emperor and Old Ancestor, 3 Absolutes. The white-robed young man was 8 feet tall and had a tall figure. He had a handsome face and an invisible aura emitted from his body, making him look especially mysterious and noble. He looked at the Golden Dragon Emperor with a smile and said in a playful tone, "Your Majesty, I trust you've been well since we last met. Where are you taking me?" The Golden Dragon Emperor and Old Ancestor, 3 Absolutes, were stunned. Both of them widened their eyes and stared at the white-robed young man. Old Ancestor, 3 Absolutes, was the most agitated. His eyes were bloodshot as he gritted his teeth and shouted, "You damn bastard, you finally can't hide it anymore. It's time for you to die." The Golden Dragon Emperor was also stunned. He revealed an expression of disbelief and said, "You're Ji Tianqing. How could it be you?" Ji Tianqing looked at Old Ancestor, 3 Absolutes with a playful gaze and said to the Golden Dragon Emperor, "Of course it's me. Other than me, who else would have a black dragon and a divine sword? Other than me, who else could kill the sect master and guardian elder of the Heaven Evasion sect and make Old Ancestor, 3 Absolutes hate me to the core?" The Golden Dragon Emperor was stunned. He looked at him deeply and sighed with a complicated expression. "Yes. Other than you, the #1 monster in the world, who else would have such great ability? No wonder when I saw this divine sword, I vaguely felt a sense of déjà vu. When Old Ancestor, 3 Absolutes told me about your enmity with the Heaven Evasion sect, I should have guessed that it was you." Ji Tianqing smiled and nodded. He cupped his hands and asked, "Your Majesty Golden Dragon Emperor, can you return the treasured sword to me now?" The Golden Dragon Emperor came back to his senses and smiled awkwardly. He quickly handed the Sword of Burial of Heaven to him. "I didn't think that this was a misunderstanding. Since that's the case, this divine sword should be returned to its rightful owner." Ji Tianqing didn't hesitate and quickly took the Sword of Burial of Heaven back. Old Ancestor, 3 Absolutes stood to the side and looked at Ji Tianqing and the Golden Dragon Emperor talking cheerfully. He was dumbfounded. He looked at Ji Tianqing and then at the Golden Dragon Emperor. He said with an embarrassed expression, You know each other?" Hearing his words, the two of them turned their heads to look at him. The Golden Dragon Emperor was expressionless, but his eyes were a bit gloomy. Ji Tianqing smiled coldly and explained, "That's right. More than a year ago, I went to the Water Race Imperial Court to pay a visit to Your Majesty Golden Dragon Emperor. Moreover, the Crown Prince of the Water Race Imperial Court, Prince Tai Yi, is my sworn brother." When he heard this, Old Ancestor, 3 Absolutes' face turned pale. His eyes were filled with deep regret. At this moment, he knew that he had kicked an iron plate. Chapter 13:19. Just as Ancestor Sanju was feeling regretful, the Golden Dragon Emperor's expression changed as he remembered something. He cupped his hands at Ji Tianqing and said sincerely, "Tianqing, when you mentioned Tai, this emperor recalled the previous matter. The demon race infiltrated the East Sea and caused a bloodbath. They slaughtered tens of millions of people and caused hundreds of millions of our people to lose their homes. Fortunately, you helped Tai quell the chaos in the East Sea and eliminate the evil demon race experts. If you hadn't appeared in time, the entire East Sea would have been in danger. The consequences would have been unimaginable. Here, this emperor represents all the people of the water race to express my deep gratitude to you." After saying that, the Golden Dragon Emperor bowed solemnly to Ji Tianqing to express his gratitude. Ji Tianqing raised his hands, indicating that the Golden Dragon Emperor could dispense with the formalities. Seeing this scene, Ancestor Sanju's expression became even more unsightly. His eyes were filled with deep shock. He never would have thought that Ji Tianqing was not only the sworn brother of the water race's crown prince, but also the imperial court of the water race owed him such a great favor. If he had known this earlier, he definitely wouldn't have reported it to the Golden Dragon Emperor. He was digging his own grave. Ancestor Sanju's intestines turned green with regret. He only wanted to turn around and run away. However, Ji Tianqing stared at him and released an invisible spiritual power to suppress him. Ancestor Sanju, you old thing, you're really despicable. You're simply despicable to the extreme. You want to steal my divine sword and black dragon, but you know that you're not strong enough, so you want to kill with a borrowed knife. You want to use His Majesty the Dragon Emperor. This is good. I'll let His Majesty personally witness how you die under my sword. As he spoke, Ji Tianqing held the Burial of Heaven sword in his hand. His entire body surged with killing intent as he prepared to attack. Ancestor Sanju's expression changed. Deep hatred surged in his eyes, and his entire body emitted a biting cold killing intent. You little bastard, you're actually the one who's the bad guy first. Since that's the case, let His Majesty the Dragon Emperor be the witness. We'll settle this grudge here. You cruelly killed our sect master, left and right protectors, and many elders. Today, I'll cut you into pieces to avenge them. Instantly, the atmosphere became tense and filled with killing intent. The sea within a radius of 100 miles was swept up by a terrifying hurricane, and huge waves of 1,000 feet were swept up. That was the impact of the collision between Ji Tianqing and Ancestor Sanju's souls. Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes knew that Ji Tianqing's strength had increased several times after being tempered by the divine lightning. However, he was an expert at the half-step essence soul realm. How could he be afraid of a junior? Of course, he couldn't, the Dragon Emperor, the Dragon Emperor. As expected, the Dragon Emperor couldn't sit still. He looked at Ji Tianqing and then at Ancestor Sanju. He immediately frowned. He stretched out his hands and gestured for the two to stop. He said in a dignified tone, Tianqing, Ancestor Sanju, I don't know about the grudge between the two of you. I won't stop you from settling your grudge. I'll also remain neutral and not help either side. However, the two of you can't die. As long as I'm here, I won't let either of you kill the other. After today, you can do whatever you want. The Dragon Emperor's attitude was very clear. Ji Tianqing and Ancestor Sanju could settle their grudge, but neither of them could be killed. If Ji Tianqing was killed, he would have let down Tai, the people of the Water Tribe, and his own conscience. If Ancestor Sanju was killed, he would have gone back on his word. He wouldn't be the emperor of the imperial court of the Water Tribe. After all, he had just promised Ancestor Sanju that he would save him if his life was in danger. After making his stance clear, he retreated far away and stood high in the sky to watch the battle. Ji Tianqing and Ancestor Sanju were stunned for a moment and frowned in dissatisfaction. If they couldn't kill each other, how could it be called settling their grudge? The two sides had already formed a blood feud. It could only end with one of them dying. Ji Tianqing frowned and thought for a moment. Suddenly, he remembered something. Previously, when he was reading the ancient books in the Heavenly Book Pavilion, he had seen an ancient secret technique that was very powerful and domineering. Thinking of that secret technique, he immediately had an idea. Even if I can't kill Ancestor Sanju, I have a way to make him suffer a fate worse than death. After making up his mind, he no longer hesitated. His body burst out with golden light that shot into the sky. He waved the broken sword and charged towards Ancestor Sanju. Old thief, take this. Swoosh! Ji Tianqing suddenly pulled out the Burial of Heaven and slashed out a dazzling sword light that was hundreds of feet long towards Ancestor Sanju. On the surface, this sword-drawing technique looked no different from before. However, the power of the sword light was 6 times stronger. Moreover, the blazing white sword light contained the power of purple lightning. Ancestor Sanju was thinking about how to resolve the hatred in his heart without killing Ji Tianqing. When the sword light attacked, he came back to his senses. His expression immediately changed and his eyes became extremely serious. Without hesitation, he waved his palms and struck out two giant golden palms to block the sword light. Bang! Bang! With two muffled sounds, the giant golden palms were shattered by the sword light. The power of the purple lightning sword light did not decrease. It struck Ancestor Sanju and sent him flying. At that moment, his magic power shield was shattered. The power of the divine lightning in the sword light turned into tens of thousands of electric arcs and drilled into his body. Lightning bolts flashed crazily, making crackling sounds. He was charred black on the spot. His body was stiff and numb. He could not use any magic power. He drew an arc in the sky and crashed into the sea below in a wretched state. However, he was a half-step essence soul realm expert after all. He came to his senses in an instant. His body emitted a dazzling golden light as he charged into the sky. That damned bastard. He really does control the power of lightning. Ancestor Sanju bellowed in shock. Black smoke spewed out of his mouth. His blackened face looked extremely comical. At that moment, Ji Tianqing charged over again. He stabbed out with the sword of burial of heaven. Swish! A cold white light with hints of purple flashed before disappearing instantly. Ancestor Sanju had seen how terrifying this sword technique was and was already prepared. He hurriedly retreated and used all his strength to shrink his defense. He took out a superior-grade soul-level Dharma treasure and used it to block in front of him. It was a grayish-brown flag. It had all sorts of effects and magical uses. Its defense was impressive as well. However, when the cold light suddenly exploded, the flag was blown to pieces on the spot. It turned into countless shards that splattered everywhere. Boom! The dazzling cold light, wrapped in tens of thousands of bolts of purple lightning, exploded in the sky and affected a radius of several hundred kilometers. Ancestor Sanju was at the center of the explosion. He obviously suffered the most. He was blown away on the spot. Over a dozen cracks appeared on his body as blood spurted out. Chapter 13:20. Patriarch 3 Absolute's heart was crumbling. 3 months ago, he was the one who chased after Ji Tianqing and forced Ji Tianqing to enter the Nine Heavens platform. Back then, Ji Tianqing was not his match at all and was trampled on by him. But now, in a short span of 3 months, the situation of both sides had reversed. Right from the start, he was beaten back repeatedly by Ji Tianqing. He was in a sorry state and his injuries were miserable. Ji Tianqing only used 2 moves to beat him until he was covered in injuries and vomiting blood. His heart was filled with grief and fury, but he had to admit a fact. Ji Tianqing's combat strength had surpassed his in all aspects. Damned little bastard, how can your strength increase by 7 or 8 times in a short 3 months? This doesn't make sense, it's impossible. Patriarch 3 Absolutes charged into the sky once more, glaring at Ji Tianqing with bloodshot eyes and roaring hysterically. His body was pitch black and emitted smoke. With a shake of his body, black ash would scatter. 5 kilometers away, Ji Tianqing stood above the sea and stared at him coldly. He sneered. Nothing is impossible. Common sense is meant to be broken. Back then, you chased me across half of the sinkhole and forced me here. Today, I'll let you have a taste of fear and despair. With that, he unleashed 100% of his strength and swung his sword fiercely towards Patriarch 3 Absolutes, who was 5 kilometers away. Sword-wielding stance. The world was shocked when the sword was unleashed, sword chi spanning 30,000 kilometers. The burial of heaven slashed out a huge white sword light with hints of purple. It was 100,000 feet long and looked like a crescent moon. In that instant, the sea region was illuminated by a blinding white light. Clouds surged in the sky and the sun and moon lost their light. Huge waves surged on the surface of the sea. An incomparably domineering and sharp sword chi spread out in all directions, forming an invisible storm. That crescent-shaped sword light was terrifyingly powerful, causing people to tremble in fear. Old Ancestor San Ju's pupils constricted as a deep sense of fear flashed through his eyes. Without any hesitation, he used his secret technique to block with all his might, hoping to neutralize this sword technique. Both of his hands were forming strange hand seals, drawing arcs of golden light in the air as he condensed the seals at the fastest speed possible. In the blink of an eye, the thousands of golden light lines formed a seal with a radius of 10 miles. This seal was extremely ancient and complex. Ordinary soul refinement realm experts wouldn't be able to understand it at all. When the seal was formed, Forefather Three Extremes let out a thunderous roar, mountain-suppressing command. Immediately, the seal lit up with a dazzling golden light, condensing into a huge golden mountain with a radius of 10 miles, smashing down towards Ji Tianqing from the sky. Boom! The crescent-shaped sword light collided with the 10 miles golden mountain in the sky, creating a loud explosion that shook the heavens. The incomparably heavy and majestic golden mountain looked very majestic, and its defensive power was super strong. However, this golden mountain only lasted for a moment before it was cut in half by the crescent-shaped sword light and shattered into pieces. Tens of thousands of golden fragments rained down from the sky, smashing into the sea below with a plop. The crescent-shaped sword light had already pierced through the sky and landed on Patriarch Three Extremes. Bang! With a dull thud, Patriarch Three Extremes was blown away once more as he vomited blood. A few more wounds appeared on his body, so deep that his bones could be seen. Blood constantly gushed out. His injuries had become even more wretched. He was now covered in wounds and blood, and his strength rapidly drained away. The violent power of lightning had already seeped through his body, passing through his charred skin and flesh to strike his meridians and bone marrow. In the blink of an eye, his meridians and bone marrow had been reduced to charcoal. As a result, his body was on the brink of destruction. Only his organs remained intact. No matter how furious and unwilling he was forced to accept reality. Right now, he could only be trampled on by Ji Tianqing. If this continued, once Ji Tianqing used the fourth strike, his organs would be destroyed as well. His entire body would be destroyed. As a result, he could no longer care about his face and dignity. He immediately chose to flee. Swoosh! He unleashed all his strength and turned into a golden streak of light, flying away as quickly as he could. However, Ji Tianqing had expected him to flee. He had blocked the path ahead and waited for him. Soul Slash! Ji Tianqing roared coldly. He instantly released 7 soul magic swords and slashed at Patriarch Three Extremes. The 7 soul magic swords were all dazzling white. They contained dense purple lightning and were surrounded by dazzling lightning. Whoosh 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 whoosh. The 7 soul magic swords danced rapidly, sealing off an area of 5 kilometers and drowning out Patriarch Three Extremes. Although there were only 7 soul magic swords, they transformed into tens of thousands of sword lights, weaving into a huge sword net and crazily attacking Patriarch Three Extremes. The Golden Dragon Emperor could not see the scene inside the sword net, but he could hear muffled bangs and Patriarch Three Extremes' miserable cries. Seeing this scene, he immediately frowned. His pupils constricted, and a deep sense of shock surged from his eyes. Patriarch Three Extremes has lived for 2,000 years. His strength has reached the half-step primordial soul realm. His cultivation is extremely profound and can be said to be invincible below the primordial soul realm. I really did not expect Ji Tianqing to be able to suppress him and trample on him so easily. This is too terrifying. Ji Tianqing is so young, yet he already has such a shocking strength. This kind of talent and aptitude is simply not seen in 10,000 years, and is rarely seen since ancient times. These thoughts flashed through the Golden Dragon Emperor's mind. He stared at Ji Tianqing in disbelief. In troubled times, such a peerless monster has appeared in the human race. This is really the imperial court's blessing, the human race's blessing. It's a pity that my son, Tai Yi, does not have such talent and cannot be compared to him. Otherwise, I can be at ease. Thinking of this, the Golden Dragon Emperor's heart surged with envy and regret. If his son could be as monstrous as Ji Tianqing, he would not have to worry about leaving the East Sea. Even if he died in battle in the northern desert, he would have no regrets. The Golden Dragon Emperor's imagination ran wild for a while before he came back to his senses. He saw that the sword net flickering with lightning had not dissipated and was still strangling Patriarch 3 Extremes. However, Patriarch 3 Extremes was no longer breathing. Not even a scream could be heard. He suddenly woke up from a dream and his expression changed. Oh no, Patriarch 3 Extremes couldn't have been killed by Ji Tianqing, right? Thinking of this, he waved his palms without hesitation and struck out 2 golden dragon claws that blotted out the sky and the sun, grabbing at the huge sword net. Tianqing, stop. Although the sword net was extremely mysterious, it could not block the attack of a primordial soul supremacy. Crack. With a loud and clear sound, the 2 huge golden dragon claws tore the lightning sword net in half. Chapter 1321. Ji Tianqing was truly invincible below the primordial soul stage. Even a half-step primordial soul stage powerhouse like Patriarch Sanju was easily crushed and ravaged by him. However, he still did not know how far he was from a primordial soul stage powerhouse. Now, the Golden Dragon Emperor had made his move. With a domineering and forceful stance, he directly tore apart the sword net formed by his spirit sword technique. He could clearly feel that unparalleled, violent, and ferocious power. It was like a huge mountain that could not be shaken. It was obvious that there was still a huge gap between him and a primordial soul stage powerhouse. There was an insurmountable gap between them. After a while, the sword light that covered the sky dissipated, and Patriarch Sanju's figure appeared. Seeing his miserable state, the Golden Dragon Emperor could not help but gasp. His expression also became somewhat complicated. Patriarch Sanju's injuries were simply too terrible. His physical body had not collapsed, but it was completely black. His internal organs, flesh, blood, and bone had all been charred. Moreover, his 4 limbs had been chopped off. His entire body was covered in cracks and holes, like a sieve that was full of holes. The Golden Dragon Emperor sighed inwardly. With such injuries, his physical body is equivalent to a pile of trash. It's better to just destroy it. He knew very well that once a half-step primordial soul stage powerhouse like Patriarch Sanju's physical body was destroyed, the consequences would be extremely severe. Even if Patriarch Sanju went into seclusion to recuperate for a few hundred years, he could still reform his physical body and recover to his peak strength. However, his martial arts foundation was damaged, and it was very likely that he would not be able to reach the primordial soul stage. There was no hope for him in this lifetime. At this moment, Patriarch Sanju's physical body gradually collapsed. With a whoosh, it split open and turned into a large cloud of black dust that scattered from the sky. His physical body was completely gone. Only a ball of white spirit light was left, floating in the air in a daze. After a momentary daze, he flew toward the Golden Dragon Emperor and yelled in a panicked voice, "Your Majesty, save me! Save me!" The spirit voice transmission spread out and reverberated on the surface of the sea. His voice was filled with fear and despair. Ji Tianqing, however, waved his hand and executed a secret capturing technique. With a giant golden palm, he grabbed old ancestor Sanju's soul. The Golden Dragon Emperor's expression changed drastically, and he hurriedly yelled, Ji Tianqing, don't act rashly. As he spoke, he teleported before Ji Tianqing and stared at him with a dignified gaze. He growled, I promised before that I would save Ancestor Sanju's life when he was in danger. This emperor is a man of his word. I will never go back on my word. Ji Tianqing nodded and revealed a playful smile as he said, Your Majesty, how could I possibly allow you to be a person who betrays your trust? Don't worry, I won't kill old Ancestor 3 Absolutes. He won't die today either. Only then was the Golden Dragon Emperor reassured, and he nodded. In that case, you can release him. Ji Tianqing shook his head, and his smile became even more playful. I only promised not to kill him, and I also guaranteed that he wouldn't die. I never said I would let him go. You. The Golden Dragon Emperor immediately frowned, and a bad premonition arose in his heart. What do you want to do? Ji Tianqing smiled but didn't answer. Instead, he executed a secret technique, and a dark purple lightning surged out of his right palm and drilled into Old Ancestor 3 Absolute's soul. Old Ancestor 3 Absolute's injuries were too severe, and his strength was weak. Being corroded by the purple lightning, he couldn't resist at all. He even let out a shrill cry. Following a series of crackling sounds, Old Ancestor 3 Absolute's soul was wrapped in lightning, and it became half white and half purple. It was very strange. His soul struggled violently for a long time before it gradually calmed down and stopped moving. The Golden Dragon Emperor was worried that Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes had been killed by the lightning, so he hurriedly checked the aura of his soul. Only then did he discover that he had only fainted. Ji Tianqing, what are you doing? He frowned at Ji Tianqing and asked in confusion. Ji Tianqing held Old Ancestor 3 Absolute's soul in his palm and explained with a smile, just now, I used a long-lost ancient secret technique called the Wind Thunder Soul Devouring Technique. I implanted a bolt of 9th Heaven Divine Lightning into Old Ancestor 3 Absolute's soul. From now on, his life and death are under my control. No matter where he escapes, as long as I willed it, that bolt of 9th Heaven Divine Lightning will destroy his soul, and he will die completely. If he doesn't want to die, he can only listen to my orders obediently and become my servant. The Golden Dragon Emperor's pupils constricted, and a complicated expression appeared on his face. He sighed and said, although this method doesn't take his life, it's more ruthless than killing him. Ji Tianqing nodded and said with a calm expression, that's right. The way to take revenge doesn't necessarily have to be to kill people. Wouldn't it be more satisfying to turn your enemy into a servant or dog that you can order around as you wish? The Golden Dragon Emperor looked at him deeply and said in a low voice, You're so young, but your methods are so ruthless. In the future, you'll definitely achieve great things. However, why have I never heard of this ancient secret technique that you speak of? Ji Tianqing smiled and explained, this secret technique was a secret technique that very few people knew in the ancient times. It was very mysterious, and very few people knew it. However, you must have heard of another divine technique derived from this secret technique, and that is, the Soul Demonic Seed Technique. The Golden Dragon Emperor's expression changed as he hurriedly nodded and said, Of course I've heard of this evil secret technique. It's said that in the ancient times, many evil cultivators used this technique to plant demonic roots in the souls of powerful cultivators of various races. In the end, they completely turned into demons and became evil spirits, bringing disaster to the world. However, in the later stages of the ancient times, this secret technique was too evil and vicious. Countless powerful cultivators spurned it and encircled it. In the end, it was gradually lost. Ji Tianqing nodded and added, You're right, that's indeed the case. However, the Wind Thunder Soul Devouring Technique was originally a secret technique of the righteous sections. After it was learned by the evil cultivators, it was used and modified to become the Soul Demonic Seed Technique. In short, many cultivation techniques originally belonged to the righteous sects, but when they fell into the hands of evil cultivators, they were used to poison living beings and became evil cultivation techniques. The Golden Dragon Emperor gently clapped his hands and a trace of admiration appeared in his eyes. He nodded and said, "That's right. Although you're young, you have such an understanding. You're indeed extraordinary. Today's matter is a personal grudge between you and Ancestor Sanju. As long as you don't kill him today, I won't go back on my word. As for how you deal with him, that's your own business. I won't ask about it, and I'll have a clear conscience." Ji Tianqing put away Ancestor Sanju's soul and cupped his hands to the Golden Dragon Emperor. "Many thanks for your Majesty's help. Since that's the case, this junior will take his leave." The Golden Dragon Emperor smiled and nodded. Now that the demon race is wreaking havoc in the human world, the world is in chaos. I'm sure you have an important task to attend to, so I won't invite you to the Dragon Palace as a guest. However, I'll remember the kindness you've shown my clan and will definitely return the favor in the future. Chapter 1322. Ji Tianqing rode on the little black dragon, flying high in the sky as fast as lightning. In just 10 short days, he left Ruin's End. He crossed the vast East China Sea and hurried back to the Central Plain. Along the way, he sat on the back of the black dragon as he silently thought about some things. It had already been over half a year since he and Yunyao left the Central Plain in search of the Neptunian god orb. In that half a year, he and Yunyao had faced countless dangers. They had almost lost their lives many times. However, they had made it through and even profited from the disaster. They had obtained many treasures, and their strength had increased drastically. Now, Yunyao was still in seclusion in the world within the sword. She was busy refining the Neptunian god orb. After all, she was refining the orb by herself. Her experience was still rather shallow, so it would take her a very long time. However, Ji Tianqing believed that her strength would definitely skyrocket once she refined the orb. Qian Yu was also in the world within the sword. She had always been cultivating in seclusion. Ever since she underwent the heavenly tribulation and reached soul refinement, the innate talent and potential of the heavenly fox bloodline had been completely unleashed. The progress of its strength could be said to be changing with each passing day, rising with the tide, so fast that it made people speechless. Yunyao, the little black dragon, and Qian Yu were all rapidly becoming stronger. To Ji Tianqing, this was something worth rejoicing over. He also felt happy for them. However, he remained calm along the way. His heart was filled with worry. He very much wanted to know how the situation of the continent had been in the half a year he had been away. What new developments and news had there been in the war between the three races and the demon army? Had the evil and powerful blood god massacred hundreds of millions of people of various races? Ji Tianqing was worried about the situation of the continent, so he got the little black dragon to hurry back as quickly as possible. A month later, the little black dragon crossed half of the East China Sea and returned to the profound sky continent. When he passed by the cities along the coast, Ji Tianqing paid special attention to the situation of the cities. He looked down from the sky and saw that the cities along the coast had recovered their peace. Most of the reconstruction had been completed as well. Without the blood god and the demon army causing trouble, the commoners had already recovered their peace. They had rebuilt their homes and lived prosperous lives. When he saw this scene, Ji Tianqing felt much more at ease. He didn't stop and continued to rush back to the central continent. He did not forget that when he was ambushed by Murongzheng, the imperial tutor had personally come to stop him. Afterwards, the imperial tutor solemnly reminded him that he had to make a trip to the imperial court after returning to Zhongzhou. The emperor summoned him and wanted to discuss matters with him face to face. Ji Tianqing had always kept this matter at the bottom of his heart, silently guessing the emperor's intentions. Why did he summon him alone? What was it that the celestial emperor had to talk to him face to face? He remembered clearly that the last time he had seen the Emperor was when he had been conferred the title of Heavenly Stellar Region Lord. Other than this kind of major event, he usually did not interact with the Emperor. For the Emperor to have the Imperial Tutor deliver a message personally, this matter is definitely not a small one. It's definitely an important one. But there aren't many things between the Emperor and I. Perhaps it has something to do with the Son of Heaven, Long Yunxiao, Kenshin, or the demon race. Could it be that the Emperor has summoned me back to the Imperial Court to have me lead an army to the northern border to resist the invasion of the demon race? Ji Tianqing secretly speculated for a long time. He felt that all of these guesses were possible, but he could not be sure what this matter was. 1 month later, Ji Tianqing returned to the central continent. On this evening, the setting sun illuminated half the sky with its golden afterglow. Ji Tianqing rode the Black Dragon to the heavenly mountain range where the Imperial Court was located. The most majestic peak in the mountain range was Heaven Connecting Peak. Half of it was obscured by the setting sun while the other half was obscured by white clouds. The palaces and buildings on the summit were faintly discernible in the clouds, and they were even covered in a layer of divine golden light. Ji Tianqing returned the Black Dragon to the Sword World and landed alone halfway up the mountain. After more than 2 years, he had once more come to the Imperial Court of the human race. Even though he was now very strong and his horizons were much broader than before, he still maintained a reverence for the majestic aura of the Imperial Court. He showed the Region Lord's golden seal to the guards before being allowed to enter the Imperial Court. Then, he followed the wide and straight divine path all the way to the summit. Not long after, he arrived at the summit and explained his purpose to the guards guarding the Imperial Court. The guard commander did not dare to delay. He hurriedly led him across the square and into the Palace of Heaven and Earth. The sacred and dignified Palace of Heaven and Earth was full of hidden sentries. The defense was very tight. The guard commander led Ji Tianqing to the Imperial Emperor's imperial study. He bowed and took his leave. Ji Tianqing tidied up his appearance before reporting in a loud voice, "Region Lord Ji Tianqing of Tianqin has an audience with His Majesty the Imperial Emperor." In the spacious, bright, exquisite, and elegant study. A wisp of sunset passed through the window and shone on the jade floor, bringing a trace of warmth to the solemn and dignified study. There were several thick piles of memorials and official documents on the large purple jade table with dragon patterns. A simple and mysterious bronze incense burner was emitting green smoke in spirals. It emitted the fragrance of purple wood and jade sandalwood, making one's soul feel refreshed. The Imperial Emperor, who was wearing a golden dragon robe and a purple gold dragon jade crown, was sitting in front of the purple jade table. He was holding a memorial in his hand and frowning in deep thought. His body was tall and his appearance was dignified. Between his brows, there was a righteous aura that could accommodate heaven and earth. Suddenly, he heard a voice outside the study. His thoughts were immediately interrupted and he put down the memorial in his hand. Ji Tianqing. Why did this brat take so long to come back? The Imperial Emperor muttered in a low voice. He frowned slightly and seemed to be a little dissatisfied. But his brows quickly relaxed and his expression returned to normal. He said in a low and dignified voice, "Come in." Ji Tianqing, who was waiting outside, heard the Imperial Emperor's voice and pushed the door open to enter. He walked to the middle of the study and stood still. He bowed solemnly and paid his respects to the Imperial Emperor. Subordinate Ji Tianqing pays his respects to the Imperial Emperor. The Imperial Emperor did not answer immediately. He looked at him calmly and sized him up with a deep gaze. In just a moment, the Imperial Emperor saw the changes in him. He was completely different from 2 years ago. Not only was his aura stronger, but he also had the confidence and dominance of an expert. There was also a vast and mysterious aura. Moreover, the Imperial Emperor could clearly see that his strength had reached the 7th level of the spirit refinement realm. His dermic powers and divine spirit aura were comparable to a half-step essence soul realm cultivator. The imperial emperor was used to seeing great storms in his life. His temperament was like a deep well, calm and unperturbed. But now that he saw such a huge change in Ji Tianqing, his eyes widened. His eyes shone brightly and his face was filled with surprise. "You brat! No wonder you delayed for so long before coming back to the imperial court to meet me. Tell me honestly, did you have a fortuitous encounter? If not, how could your strength improve by leaps and bounds and reach such a terrifying level?" At this moment, not only was the imperial emperor shocked, but his tone was also not as dignified as before. Chapter 13:23. When Ji Tianqing saw the emperor's reaction, he wanted to laugh in his heart and felt a trace of pride. The emperor who has always been aloof and incomparably dignified would actually lose his composure like this. However, he knew that he couldn't hide his changes from the emperor, so he answered truthfully, "Your Majesty, to be honest, you are right." When the emperor saw his respectful attitude without a trace of resentment, he revealed a satisfied smile. "And, since that's the case, then this emperor won't pursue your crime of being late for a few months. You may rise." Ji Tianqing then stood up and looked at the emperor with a calm expression. He asked in a solemn tone, "May I ask what orders does the emperor have for this subordinate to be summoned back?" The emperor muttered to himself for a while before recovering his dignified face. He asked in a deep voice, "Ji Tianqing, let's not talk about this matter for now. This emperor has something to ask you. You must answer truthfully. Please enlighten me, emperor." Ji Tianqing cupped his hands and bowed. He listened with a calm expression. The monarch stroked his beard and asked in a low voice, "You have a deep grudge with the Murong family. Murong Zheng tried to kill you on the way and you were about to kill him to avenge yourself. However, this emperor sent the imperial tutor to stop you and prevent you from taking revenge. Have you ever resented this emperor in your heart?" Ji Tianqing was startled. He never thought that the emperor would ask him this question. Could it be that the emperor sensed my dissatisfaction and was afraid that I would be disloyal, so he tested me in person? This thought flashed through his mind and he immediately became alert. He quickly answered, "Your Majesty, you are the emperor of my clan, the leader of millions of people. This subordinate is your subject. Of course, I have to follow your orders. How could I dare to complain?" However, the emperor didn't listen to his dignified words. He stared at him with a sharp gaze and asked, "You don't dare, or you don't?" After saying that, he added another sentence, "Think carefully before you answer. This emperor wants to hear the truth. If you have half a lie, you won't be able to hide it from this emperor." Ji Tianqing was even more confused. He did not know what the emperor's intentions were. However, he could sense that the monarch's soul energy was enveloping him, as if he could see through his heart. He knew that he couldn't hide it from the emperor, so he didn't try to explain himself and answered truthfully, reporting to the emperor, "This subordinate did have some complaints at first and was very unwilling. However, after the imperial tutor explained to this subordinate understood your difficulties and intentions. Naturally, the resentment in my heart dissipated. Even when this subordinate caused a huge disturbance in the central state, you didn't pursue the matter. Even if it caused the people to criticize me, you still wanted to protect this subordinate. After careful consideration, I understand that you naturally have your reasons and arrangements for doing so." The imperial emperor had been silent all this time. He stared at him, observing the changes in his expression and the fluctuations of his divine soul. After he finished speaking, the emperor concluded that he was not lying. Only then did his expression soften. "That's right. Tianqing, it's naturally for the best that you can understand this emperor's intentions. Now, there's only you and this emperor in this study. Since you can tell this emperor the truth, it proves that this emperor can still trust you and can still entrust you with important tasks." When Ji Tianqing heard this, he knew that the emperor was just throwing a brick to attract jade. The main topic was about to come. He cupped his hands and took the initiative to say, as the Tianqian region lord, this subordinate should serve the people. If the emperor has any important tasks, please tell me. This subordinate will go through water and tread on fire without hesitation. The emperor glanced at him and said with a playful tone, "Don't be so full of yourself. If this emperor gives you an important task now and asks you to go to the northern border alone to kill thousands of demons and protect the peace of our people, would you still dare to agree?" Ji Tianqing slowly raised his head and looked directly at the emperor. His gaze was firm and unyielding. His voice was sonorous as he said a word. "I dare." The emperor was stunned for a moment. Then, he raised his eyebrows and revealed a playful smile. "You brat, I'm afraid you've had an amazing adventure. You're so confident and ambitious." Ji Tianqing shook his head and said in a serious tone, "Your Highness, this has nothing to do with the adventure I've had. Even without your order, I will go to the battlefield and kill the demons. I'm not a saint, nor am I the ruler of a clan. I don't dare to dream of saving hundreds of millions of people. But this subordinate has a blood feud with the demons. I will never let them go." The emperor looked at him deeply and nodded solemnly, saying, "Good. Very good. Tianqing, I'm very pleased that you're so determined. However, the important task I'm going to give you today is not for you to go to the battlefield to kill the demons. You're the #1 genius of our clan, the most powerful person in the past 1,000 years. It's a waste to let you go to the battlefield to fight." Ji Tianqing's expression changed. He frowned slightly and asked, "May I ask what you want me to do, Emperor?" "Go to a place and get an item." The emperor showed a serious and solemn expression and said in a vigorous tone, "A clan protection divine weapon." "Get a clan protection divine weapon?" Ji Tianqing was even more confused. He said in disbelief, "What clan protection divine weapon? How do I get it?" The emperor raised his hand and signaled him not to be anxious. He said in a neither fast nor slow tone, "Regarding this matter, I'll first tell you a story from the past. 10,000 years ago, in the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range in the south, there was an earth-shattering volcanic eruption. Endless fire covered tens of thousands of miles and dyed half the sky red. The tens of thousands of mountains in the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range turned into a sea of fire and scorched earth. Hundreds of thousands of people died because of this. Our clan's imperial court sent elite experts to the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range to investigate the situation. After half a year, they finally found the shocking secret hidden in the depths of the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range. But after those experts entered the depths of the ground, none of them survived. They all died. This matter shocked the imperial court. The current emperor brought the empress and personally went to the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range to investigate the reason. In the end, the emperor brought back a top primordial soul-level Dharma treasure from the depths of the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range. This item came from the ancient times and was refined by an ancient almighty. It has the power to burn the world. It's called the Celestial God Fire Cauldron. Hearing this, Ji Tianqing vaguely understood the emperor's meaning. He was instantly filled with curiosity and anticipation for the Celestial God Fire Cauldron. He didn't interrupt the emperor and continued to listen carefully. This cauldron can be called a peerless divine weapon. It's hidden in the depths of the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range. Because of its age, the power imbalance caused the volcano to erupt. In order to obtain that divine weapon, the empress was severely injured. After returning to the imperial court, she died in less than 100 years. The emperor spent decades of effort and used up all the imperial court's wealth to repair the Celestial God Fire Cauldron and take it for his own use. However, the Celestial God Fire Cauldron is too powerful and can't be stored in the imperial court for a long time. It must be nurtured in the dragon vein of the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range. Chapter 1324. After listening to the emperor's story, Ji Tianqing already understood the emperor's intentions. "Emperor, you mean you want me to go to the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range to retrieve the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron?" The emperor nodded slightly and said solemnly, "That's right." Ji Tianqing frowned and asked, "Emperor, I have a question. The Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron has been stored in the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range since 10,000 years ago. Now that 10,000 years have passed, the thousands of experts guarding that divine artifact must have died long ago, right?" The emperor nodded again and explained, "Of course. However, I have not finished my story, so you have to listen patiently. Please continue, Emperor." Ji Tianqing was stunned for a moment before he quickly cupped his hands and continued to listen. The emperor continued, "Those thousands of experts have been guarding the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range to protect the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron. However, after the news was leaked, all the experts in the world knew about it, especially the experts of the demon race. They schemed to snatch the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron. After all, the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron was an ancient divine artifact with extremely strong and ferocious power. It was the nemesis of the demon race. Countless experts fought against the invaders in order to protect the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron and eventually died. The imperial court constantly sent out reinforcements, and generations of imperial court generals rushed to the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range. Until 1,000 years ago, when the demon race invaded, the ancient demon emperor sneaked into middle ground and massacred my people. I ordered the generals guarding the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range to retrieve the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron and escort it to the imperial court. I wanted to borrow the power of the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron to deal with the ancient demon emperor and get rid of the demon venomous insects. However, hundreds of generals and experts were intercepted by several demon marshals while escorting the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron, and almost all of them died. Fortunately, I arrived in time to protect the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron and used the power of the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron to kill several demon marshals and suppress the demon venomous insects. I'm sure you know what happened after that. I asked Kenshin for help. Kenshin chased after the ancient demon emperor and sealed him in Tianjin region. Hearing this, emperor's words, the Dipper God Fire Cauldron of the emperor had Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron the emperor. And he continued to listen to the emperor's Dipper God Cauldron, the general's guards to the Big Dipper, all the Dipper mountain ranges Dipper the Big God Cauldron. On Big S Dipper God Dipper God. All of the guards have been sacrificed, so I sent a few of my trusted subordinates to be stationed in the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range. In order to deceive the public, and in consideration of the long term, I ordered them to create a sect that will forever guard Sunless Peak and protect the Heavenly Dipper God Fire Cauldron for generations. Now, 1,000 years had passed. That sect was living in seclusion, and it was secretly reproducing and developing. It had already become a powerful force under the imperial court. The sect master has changed twice, but the secret of the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron is no longer known to the world, becoming an unsolved mystery. Ji Tianqing was surprised when he heard this. He nodded and praised, "Emperor, you are indeed meticulous. You plan ahead. This method is really unexpected. If a large number of generals are stationed at the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron, everyone in the world knows that it is where the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron is. But if it is a hidden sect, it can deceive people and successfully protect the secret of the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron." The emperor revealed a gratified smile and nodded. "That's right. The Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron is the imperial court's clan guarding divine artifact. It can suppress the demon race and protect our people. How can it be lost? I have already inherited the imperial court's clan guarding divine artifact, the human sovereign sword. I can no longer sacrifice my divine soul to the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron and refine it into a life-guarding divine artifact. I have long planned to bestow the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron to Yun Shao after he reaches the soul refinement realm and let him control this divine artifact. It's just that at present, the Fiend Race army is sweeping the world once more, wantonly attacking the various races. Troubled times have already arrived. The situation is urgent, time waits for no one. This emperor must take out the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron as soon as possible and entrust it to a suitable person. Only then can it unleash a greater effect. Therefore, this emperor deliberated for a long time and finally decided to entrust this clan-guarding divine artifact to you. Let you wield the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron and resist the fiend race's invasion. But, you have to personally head to the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range's Sunless Peak and personally take out the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron. Only then can you obtain the divine cauldron's recognition. Ji Tianqing finally understood everything and knew the whole story. I didn't expect that I unintentionally snatched the divine artifact that should have belonged to Long Yunxiao again. If this guy knew, he wouldn't bear a grudge against me, right? This thought flashed across in his mind, and he could not resist somewhat wanting to laugh. But this matter was the emperor's decision. He naturally had to abide by the decree. Even if Long Yunxiao had any complaints, he could only blame it on the emperor and not on him. Collecting his thoughts, he bowed with a solemn expression and cupped his hands to the emperor. Thank you, Emperor, for bestowing me with the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron. If I wield the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron, I will definitely protect my people and territory with my life and fight the fiend race to the end. The emperor nodded with satisfaction and said in a deep voice, here is a map of the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range. Take it and follow the map to find Sunless Peak. In addition, this emperor has already written a decree. Take it with you. When you reach the divine hidden sect, pass this decree to the sect master. She will naturally know what to do. With that, the emperor waved his big sleeve and shot out a ball of gentle golden light that flew in front of Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing reached out to take a look and saw that there were two scrolls in the golden light. The white scroll was the map, and the golden scroll was the emperor's decree. Tianqing, time is of the essence. Leave for the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range as soon as possible and retrieve the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron as soon as possible. This emperor will be waiting for your good news in the imperial court. I hope everything goes well for you. Ji Tianqing did not say anything more and quickly put away the map and the decree. He cupped his hands and bowed. Tianqing obeys the emperor's order. After bowing, he turned around and left the imperial study. After he left, the emperor pondered for a long time in silence before he continued to review official documents and deal with important military matters. After Ji Tianqing left the palace of heaven and earth, he passed through the square in front of the palace and walked down the mountain. Before coming to the imperial court, he planned to go back to Zhongzhou City to check on the situation of the imperial residence and Cloud Spirit Palace. But the emperor ordered him to hurry to the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range as soon as possible, so he could only give up on this idea. Swoosh! After leaving the imperial court, he rode the black dragon into the sky and rushed to the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range as fast as lightning. On the way, he calmed down and carefully recalled the emperor's words. Vermilion Bird Mountain Range, Sunless Peak, Hidden God Sect. Why do I have a sense of déjà vu when I heard these names before? He muttered the three words Divine Hidden Sect and frowned for a long time before he finally remembered. Chapter 1325. Shi Zhongjian was the simple and honest golden-haired youth who called himself the Prince of the Golden Lion race. When Ji Tianqing first entered the southern desolate swamp, he traveled with Shi Zhongjian to find the broken divine sword. They explored the Sin Dragon Pond and encountered an azure dragon. They even went through the rainbow forest and were ambushed by the spiritual insects race. In the end, they met the earth spirit race in Carefree Mountain and found the broken sword, the burial of heaven. The second time Ji Tianqing saw Shi Zhongjian was on the way to the Shao clan. At that time, Shi Zhongjian and his followers were attacked by two soul realm demon beasts. They were seriously injured and almost lost their lives. Ji Tianqing saved Shi Zhongjian's life and found that Shi Zhongjian had obtained the azure dragon from the Sin Dragon Pond. Now, he was going to the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range to retrieve the heavenly Handle God Fire Cauldron. Never in his wildest dreams would he have thought that the sect that had guarded the divine cauldron for generations on Sunless Peak was actually the Hidden God sect. This is too much of a coincidence. If this Hidden God sect is Shi Zhongjian's Hidden God sect, then I will definitely be able to see him again. Ji Tianqing muttered to himself. Shi Zhongjian's simple and honest appearance appeared in his mind and he couldn't help but smile. The Vermilion Bird Mountain Range was located in the southwest of Central State, between the human and demon territories. Even with the little black dragon's flying speed, it would take about 10 days to travel from the Imperial Court to the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range. The Vermilion Bird Mountain Range was very vast and desolate. No one could be seen for many years. Without a map, ordinary martial practitioners couldn't enter the depths of the mountain range. Moreover, the terrain of the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range was very steep and there were many powerful demons and beasts. The environment was very dangerous. An expert like Ji Tianqing wouldn't be able to find Sunless Peak if he rashly entered the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range and wasn't familiar with the terrain. Moreover, he would encounter all kinds of trouble and danger. Therefore, he took out the map of the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range given to him by the Emperor and carefully observed it for a long time. He memorized the entire map and engraved it in his mind before putting it away. Then, he placed the broken sword on the black dragon's back and entered the sword world. Yun Yao, Qian Yu, and the Jin Shan King were all in seclusion in peaceful Soil City, constantly increasing their strength. However, Ji Tianqing did not enter the sword world to visit them. He flew above the city, crossing thousands of li of mountains and rivers. He arrived at the depths of the vast mountain range and stopped above a valley. This was a deep valley, with a radius of 200 miles. The valley was filled with all kinds of strange flowers and plants, and a dense forest. In the middle of the valley stood an ancient, dark green tree that was thousands of feet tall, like a giant peak. This ancient tree was incomparably huge. It was at least 300 feet thick. At first glance, one could tell that it was a spirit tree that had lived for thousands of years. Hundreds of thousands of branches extended from the treetop that was thousands of feet tall, and it was covered with green and translucent leaves. The vast canopy of the trees covered the entire valley within a radius of 200 miles. This astonishingly huge ancient tree was actually the family treasure of the Duanmu family. It was a high-grade soul-level magic treasure, the Azure Light Treasure Tree. Ever since Ji Tianqing killed Duanmu Huang and obtained the Azure Light Treasure Tree, he rarely used this magic treasure. He only used it for healing. As his strength increased, the chances of him using the Azure Light Treasure Tree became fewer and fewer. But now, the Azure Light Treasure Tree had a new use and effect. Because it had become Forefather San Ju's main body. More than a month ago, Ji Tianqing used the Wind Thunder Soul Devouring technique to control Forefather San Ju's soul, turning him into a slave. Unfortunately, Forefather San Ju's physical body had been destroyed, and only his soul was left. He could not unleash much power. If Forefather San Ju went into seclusion to recuperate and reform his physical body, it would take at least a few hundred years. This was obviously not realistic. Therefore, Ji Tianqing had a sudden idea to merge Forefather San Ju's soul with the Azure Light Treasure Tree. This way, Forefather San Ju would be able to possess his main body and recover his strength in a short period of time. Moreover, he would be able to unleash the power of the Azure Light Treasure Tree and possess powerful healing and recovery abilities. Once this method succeeded, Ji Tianqing would have a powerful slave with powerful healing abilities. Ji Tianqing stood in the sky above the valley and stared at the Azure Light Treasure Tree for a while before seeing the result. After more than a month of seclusion, Forefather San Ju had successfully merged with the Azure Light Treasure Tree. Now, the Azure Light Treasure Tree was Forefather San Ju, and Forefather San Ju was the Treasure Tree. The two had merged into one, complementing each other and becoming stronger. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing revealed a gratified expression and asked, "Forefather San Ju, how is your cultivation going?" Forefather Sanju was cultivating, trying his best to increase his strength. Suddenly hearing Ji Tianqing's voice, the entire treasure tree trembled, and the thousands of branches rustled. Then, Forefather Sanju's voice came from the treasure tree, and his tone was filled with respect and fear as he said, "Master, I have successfully merged with the treasure tree and recovered 80% of my strength. This old servant kneels and thanks Master for not killing me. Thank you Master for bestowing this old servant with the green light treasure tree as my body, allowing this old servant to benefit from this disaster and obtain a new life." Ji Tianqing was very satisfied with Forefather Sanju's reaction, and asked despite knowing the answer, "You were originally a half-step immortal soul stage expert, able to call yourself an ancestor overseas and live a carefree life. Now that you have become my slave, not only do you not have any complaints, you even want to thank me. Why is that?" The treasured tree gently swayed its branches, bowed down and made a respectful gesture, and answered, "Master, this old servant had eyes but failed to see. I dared to provoke you, so I deserve to die. Master only needs a single thought to completely destroy this old servant. However, Master is benevolent and spared my life. This is a great favor. I'm still alive now, and with the azure light treasure tree as my body, I have a lifespan of tens of thousands of years. This is something I didn't dare to imagine in the past. Furthermore, Master, you are the #1 genius in the world. In the future, you will definitely be able to transcend the cage and enter the martial Dao's divine realm. I can follow you and serve you. In the future, I will have the chance to see a wider world. This is my lifelong dream, it is precisely because of this that I am grateful to you." The corners of Ji Tianqing's mouth curled up as he said in a playful tone, "Forefather Sanju, there's no need to pretend with me. I won't fall for it. To tell you the truth, no matter how much you hate me, it's useless. Don't think that you can make me lower my guard by pretending to be loyal and obedient. You will have a chance to escape in the future. That's impossible. Don't even think about it. As long as my soul isn't destroyed, I can detonate the divine lightning with a thought and destroy your soul. Don't dream of dispelling that divine lightning unless you can reach the 9th tribulation realm. However, with me around, as long as I'm unwilling, you will never be able to reach that realm. Therefore, if you are smart enough, stay by my side obediently and be a loyal lackey." Chapter 13:26. Ji Tianqing's words caused the azure light treasure tree to tremble. Clearly, these words were like daggers that stabbed deeply into Forefather 3-Severing's soul, causing his thoughts to churn. He fell silent for a long time before he gradually calmed down. Swish! Azure light surged out of the azure light treasure tree, quickly condensing into a figure that flew before Ji Tianqing. The figure condensed from green light was an old man in green robes. He looked exactly like Forefather Sanju. Although he was tall and burly, his aura was extremely gentle and reserved, just like an old butler. He bowed respectfully, then said to Ji Tianqing, "Master, thank you for telling me the truth, and dispelling those unrealistic fantasies of mine. Don't worry Master, I understand your intentions. I won't dare to be disloyal in the future and will be absolutely loyal to you." Ji Tianqing glanced at him. Seeing the calmness after despair in his eyes, he nodded in satisfaction, "It's good that you understand. In the past, you were Forefather 3-Severing of the Heaven Evasion sect. Although you were domineering, you were shackled at the soul refinement realm and would never be able to reach the soul refinement realm. Now, you've fused with the azure light treasure tree and become my servant. To you, this is not only an unforeseen event, but also a fortuitous opportunity and fortune." Forefather 3-Severing nodded and said emotionally, "Everything that has happened in the past few months has been like a dream to me. I'll just treat it as a rebirth. From today onwards, I'm no longer Forefather 3-Severing. I'm just an old servant by your side. Don't call me Forefather 3-Severing. Just call me a San. A San." Ji Tianqing raised an eyebrow and looked at him strangely. Forefather 3 Severing nodded calmly and explained, I've been an orphan since I was young. I was adopted by my master and brought to the Heaven Evasion sect to cultivate. After I became famous, I called myself Swordsman 3 Severing. 1,000 years later, I became Forefather 3 Severing. Ji Tianqing waved his hand, indicating that he didn't need to say anything more. Okay, then I'll call you Ah-san from now on. You can recuperate here. I'll call you when I need you. With that, he turned around and left. Farewell, master. Forefather 3 Absolutes stood in the air above the valley and bowed respectfully, sending him off with his eyes. In the blink of an eye, 10 days had passed. That evening, Ji Tianqing entered the depths of the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range and arrived at Sunless Peak. Looking down from high up in the sky, one could only see steep and lofty mountain ranges all around them. There was no end to them. A few enormous and majestic mountain ranges lay quietly on the ground like enormous dark brown dragons, bathing in the light of the setting sun. In the mountain range, there were many towering peaks that were thousands of feet tall, emitting an ancient aura. Ji Tianqing didn't know how long this mountain range had existed. However, judging from the degree of weathering of the rocks in the mountain range, at least tens of thousands of years had passed. The strange thing was that the temperature in the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range was very high. The closer one got to the depths of the mountain range, the hotter the air became. Especially near Sunless Peak, the air fluctuated invisibly, emitting a terrifyingly high temperature. Cultivators below the Sky Origin realm couldn't stay in this area at all. If they stayed any longer, they would be roasted into charcoal. Of course, the mountain range in all directions was barren, and not a drop of water could be seen. All the mountain ranges and the ground were charred black. There were even dark red lava flowing in some low-lying valleys. There were also many mountain peaks that were emitting black smoke, and one could vaguely see flames flickering. Before Ji Tianqing came, the emperor had briefly introduced that there was a huge volcano hidden in the center of the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range. Under Sunless Peak, there was a vast sea of lava hidden deep underground. Ji Tianqing didn't know why this mountain range was called the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range. However, he knew that this was a world of fire, and the surrounding mountains were all called Flaming Mountains. Among the many mountain peaks, there was one that was the most majestic and tall. It was the Sunless Peak in front of him. It was 2,000 feet tall, covered an area of 400 miles, and was indomitable. There were no buildings at the foot of the mountain, and it didn't have a plaza like ordinary sections. It was surrounded by deep valleys and mountain streams, and there was only a mountain gate at the waist of the mountain. The mountain gate wasn't big, only 10 feet tall and 10 feet wide. It looked small and low-key. However, there was a stone tablet beside the mountain gate that was engraved with the words, Hidden God Sect, in dark gold. The writing was like dragons and snakes, and it was majestic. Behind the mountain gate, there was a 5-step wide black stone staircase that zigzagged and extended to the peak of the mountain. On the peak of the mountain, there was a flat land with a radius of a few dozen miles. There were a dozen palaces and courtyards, and they were all very simple and unadorned. Looking from afar, those palaces and courtyards didn't look splendid and dazzling, and they didn't have a sacred and honorable aura. In general, the Hidden God sect looked very low-key, simple, and weathered, just like an ordinary second-rate sect, and not like a grand and magnificent top sect. Ji Tianqing looked at Sunless Peak from top to bottom and saw some clues. He revealed a playful smile. The Hidden God sect hid so deeply and kept such a low profile. It is indeed a wise move. Even if the experts of the various races are looking for the divine cauldron, they wouldn't care about the Hidden God sect, and they wouldn't associate the divine cauldron with this ordinary sect. He secretly admired the people of the Hidden God sect for their wisdom and forbearance. Swish! He put the little black dragon into the sword world and descended from the sky, landing outside the mountain gate at the waist of the mountain. Then, a green light flashed beside him, and an old man wearing a green robe appeared. It was old ancestor Sanju. Old ancestor Sanju obediently followed behind him and walked towards the mountain gate of the hidden god sect. It was empty outside the mountain gate, and there was even a layer of dust on the ground. When Ji Tianqing walked to the foot of the mountain gate, a sloppy old man wearing a grey robe and carrying a wine gourd walked out of a stone house at the side. This old man's body was stooped, and his long hair was messy and tangled. His grey robe was also greasy and tattered. He carried a green-skinned gourd in his hand, and his whole body reeked of alcohol. His nose was also red, and he looked exactly like an old drunkard. "Hey! Kid, stop right there." The old drunkard carried the wine gourd, and his figure flashed in front of Ji Tianqing, blocking his way. His footsteps were a little staggered, and his body swayed as he walked a few steps. He sized up Ji Tianqing with his eyes, and then shouted, "Kid, what are you doing? Why are you trespassing on Sunless Peak?" Without waiting for Ji Tianqing to speak, old ancestor Sanju took 2 steps forward and shouted with a dignified voice, "Impudent! You sloppy old drunkard, how dare you be disrespectful to my master? My master is the Honorable Heavenly Stellar Region Lord, and he came to the Hidden God sect on the orders of the human race's emperor to discuss important matters. Why aren't you moving out of the way? If you delay the important matters, how can you bear the responsibility?" Old ancestor Sanju's voice was stern, and as he spoke, he released an invisible divine soul aura that suppressed the old drunkard. If it was an ordinary person, they would have been scared out of their wits and knelt down to greet him. But that old drunkard only quivered, and immediately sobered up, his eyes becoming deep and bright. Chapter 1327. Ji Tianqing found it strange just now. Why would the Hidden God sect make such an arrangement? Even if they didn't send a large number of experts to guard the sect, they shouldn't have let a sloppy old drunkard guard the sect, right? Now, the old drunkard had blocked old ancestor Sanju's divine soul pressure without retreating half a step or showing the slightest fear. Only now did he understand that the old drunkard was a hidden expert. He secretly released his divine soul power and discovered that the old drunkard's strength had reached the 9th level of the soul refinement realm. Moreover, the old drunkard's cultivation was abnormally deep and was not inferior to the current old ancestor Sanju. No wonder the Hidden God sect is so desolate with only one old drunkard guarding it. With him here, it's comparable to an army of thousands. As long as it's not a primordial soul supreme, it's impossible to barge in. This Hidden God sect seems to be low-key and even a little declining, but they have such wisdom and courage. It's really unbelievable. These thoughts flashed through Ji Tianqing's mind, and he finally understood why the emperor trusted and valued the Hidden God sect so much. At this time, the old drunkard raised his head and drank a mouthful of wine with his green calabash in hand. The strong smell of wine seeped out and actually contained a strong divine soul power, causing one's divine soul to be in a daze. His dark face flushed red as he glanced sideways at old ancestor Sanju and Ji Tianqing. He sneered, "Ha ha ha. It's a good thing that an esteemed guest has come, and our sect should treat you warmly. However, our sect is not receiving guests today, and from ancient times until now, we have never received rude guests. Please go back, don't spoil this old man's mood." The old drunkard's breath reeked of alcohol as he said these words drunkenly. As his voice fell, he casually drew a line with his left index and middle fingers, creating a deep ravine on the stone floor beneath his feet. This 1-meter-long ravine separated him from old ancestor Sanju. His meaning was clear. If Ji Tianqing and old ancestor Sanju dared to take half a step forward, he wouldn't be polite. Seeing this, old ancestor Sanju immediately frowned and shouted with a cold expression, "You old drunkard, you're really unreasonable. I must teach you a lesson." As he spoke, old ancestor Sanju raised his palm and was about to attack. "Ah San!" Ji Tianqing waved his hand, indicating for old ancestor Sanju to leave. Old Ancestor 3 Absolute's body trembled. He hurriedly suppressed his anger and surging magic power and obediently retreated to the side. Ji Tianqing took 2 steps forward and calmly looked at the old drunkard. He took out the mountain and river seal and said, "Senior, please forgive my servant for offending you earlier. I am Ji Tianqing, the leader of the Tianjin region. Today, I am here to visit your sect under the order of the emperor. I would like to discuss an important matter with your sect leader. Please pass on my message." He announced his identity and flashed his identity token. He expressed his intentions to the Hidden God sect in a formal manner. In his mind, the old drunkard was a martial expert. He would know what was important and wouldn't dare to make things difficult for him. But he didn't expect that the old drunkard would glance at him and didn't even bother to look at the seal in his hand. He waved his hand and said, "Young man, who you are and who you're following has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with my sect. My sect is a small sect that lives in seclusion. We have always avoided the world and never participated in worldly disputes. We have nothing to do with the imperial courts of the various races. Please go back and don't stay here. Otherwise, I will have to chase you out." Ji Tianqing immediately frowned and stared into the old drunkard's eyes. He asked in a deep voice, "Senior, are you serious? You have to consider the consequences." The old drunkard glanced at him and drank a mouthful of wine. He sneered mockingly, "Are you threatening me? Ha ha ha. Young people nowadays are so arrogant and lawless." Finished speaking, he carried his wine gourd and staggered back into the sect. He returned to his stone house and lay down. This damned old drunkard. Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes was so angry that his face turned ashen. He frowned and was about to chase after the old drunkard. Ji Tianqing waved his hand. Only then did he stop and retreat. He looked at Ji Tianqing with a puzzled expression and asked, "Master, is this old drunkard's brain muddled? Or is he pretending to be muddle-headed? Does he dare to disobey the orders of the imperial court?" Ji Tianqing frowned and thought for a moment. He shook his head and said, "When he said those words just now, I saw that his eyes were clear and his soul fluctuations were normal. He didn't seem to be lying. This means that this old drunkard probably doesn't know." Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes was even more puzzled and asked back, "Even if the Hidden God sect is deliberately hiding it, the old drunkard is a top expert. How could he not know about the relationship between the Hidden God sect and the imperial court?" Ji Tianqing said calmly, "Not necessarily. This old drunkard is just a gatekeeper, not an elder or sect master of the Hidden God sect. It's possible that he doesn't know." Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes thought for a moment and felt that it made sense. He couldn't help but ask, if a gatekeeper is so strong, how strong is the Hidden God sect? Could it be that they have a primordial spirit realm expert overseeing them? That's possible. Ji Tianqing nodded. Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes thought for a moment and asked, "Master, what do you plan to do? You don't know who the sect master of the Hidden God sect is, and you can't contact him. Are we going to be stopped by the old drunkard and have to wait here?" Ji Tianqing shook his head and showed a playful smile, saying, "There's no need for that. I have my ways." After saying this, he rummaged through his interspatial ring for a while and quickly found a communication jade slip. He inputted a message into the communication jade slip and released the jade slip. Whoosh! The jade slip turned into a stream of light and flew into the sky, immediately disappearing. Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes saw this and asked doubtfully, "Master, what are you?" Ji Tianqing smiled and explained, "A long time ago, I met an upright and brave young man who happened to be a disciple of the Hidden God sect. When I went to the Shao clan and saved his life on the way, he gave me 2 communication jade slips and told me to contact him in the future. It just so happened that they came in handy today." Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes came to a realization and silently stood to the side, not saying anything more. The two waited for 100 breaths of time at the mountain gate before they saw a dazzling light of true essence on the mountain peak. In the next moment, a young man in white robes, riding a 1,000-meter-long, dark gray flood dragon, charged over at lightning speed. Whoosh! In a short 2 breaths of time, the gray flood dragon rushed to the mountain gate and stopped in front of Ji Tianqing and Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes. The violent wind brought by the flood dragon blew the sand and stones under the mountain gate, and dust filled the sky. The white-robed young man didn't care at all. His face was flushed with excitement as he hurriedly jumped off the dragon's back. Chapter 1328. This white-robed, tall and sturdy young man with a head full of golden hair was Shi Zhongjian. The flood dragon he was riding was the azure dragon he obtained from the evil dragon pool. Shi Zhongjian's face was flushed with excitement as he looked at Ji Tianqing with sparkling eyes, rubbing his hands excitedly. Ji Tianqing looked at him and saw that he had changed a lot. He couldn't help showing a gratified smile and nodded. "Lion, I haven't seen you for half a year. You've changed a lot." Shi Zhongjian became even more excited after receiving his praise and nodded repeatedly. "Big brother Tianqing, you flatter me. This is all thanks to Brother Dragon. It has helped me a lot in my cultivation." At the mention of the azure dragon, Shi Zhongjian was eloquent. Ji Tianqing understood his temperament, so he patiently listened to him. After a while, Shi Zhongjian gradually calmed down and remembered to ask about proper business. "Big brother Tianqing, our hidden god sect is hidden deep in the Vermilion Bird Mountain range. Without a map, it would be difficult to find it. How did you find this place? Did you come here just to see me?" "Of course not." Ji Tianqing smiled and shook his head. Shi Zhongjian's eyes flashed with a touch of disappointment, but he immediately let it go and laughed at himself. "Like I said, Big brother Tianqing is a peerless genius and a noble person. You have too many things to deal with on a daily basis. How could you have time to visit me? Big brother Tianqing, what business do you have at Sunless Peak?" Ji Tianqing calmly explained, "I came here on the Emperor's order to find the sect master of the Hidden God sect to discuss an important matter." "Ah? What emperor?" Shi Zhongjian frowned and scratched his head, asking doubtfully, "Why did the Emperor ask you to find our sect master?" Ji Tianqing waved his hand and instructed, "This matter is of great importance. It's not convenient to talk about it here. Let's go in first and I'll explain it to you later." Shi Zhongjian didn't doubt it and quickly nodded, "Okay. Then let's go in first. Big brother Tianqing, this is your first time visiting our sect, so you must stay for a few days. Let me treat you well." With that, Shi Zhongjian led Ji Tianqing and Forefather 3 Absolutes through the mountain gate and towards the peak of the mountain. The old drunkard in the stone house immediately jumped out and pulled Shi Zhongjian's sleeve. "Little lion, what are you doing?" Shi Zhongjian bowed to the old drunkard and said with a smile, "Old man, this is young Master Ji Tianqing, the #1 genius of the continent, the youngest imperial prince and realm lord. He is also my great benefactor. Not only did he save my life, he also taught me many things. I've been thinking about when I'll be able to meet Big brother Tianqing again. I didn't expect him to really come looking for me." Old drunkard frowned slightly and subconsciously glanced at Ji Tianqing, a hint of surprise flashing in his eyes. However, his expression immediately returned to normal. He nodded to Shi Zhongjian and said with a smile, "Since that's the case, you have to treat him well. Don't neglect your esteemed guest." With that, old drunkard carried his wine gourd and went back into the stone house. Ji Tianqing glanced at old drunkard and followed Shi Zhongjian to the peak of the mountain. Along the way, he asked with a voice transmission, "Lion, who is this old drunkard? Why would such a powerful expert be reduced to such a sorry state and have to guard the mountain gate?" Shi Zhongjian was stunned for a moment, then he withdrew the smile on his face and said with a complicated tone, "This old man was once the left protector of our sect. When he was young, he was also elegant and very dignified. However, He had always loved our sect leader and was infatuated with her for 300 years. Finally, one day, he couldn't help but confess his feelings in front of others. He was heartlessly rejected by the sect leader and was punished. Since then, the left protector resigned from his position as protector and volunteered to guard the mountain gate. He drank himself to death every day. Hearing Shi Zhongjian's words, Ji Tianqing suddenly opened his eyes wide. He quickly interrupted him and asked, "Wait a moment. Old drunkard, he actually fell in love with your sect leader. This is too ridiculous, isn't it? Is his taste so heavy?" "Yes." Shi Zhongjian nodded and said with a sigh, "How could a protector of our sect fall in love with the sect leader? Isn't this going against the rules? Of course, the sect leader would reject him." Ji Tianqing nodded and said sympathetically, "He's a soul-refining realm cultivator, after all. I can't believe he has that kind of fetish. He even dared to confess his feelings in front of everyone. No wonder he became so sloppy. However, he is also very infatuated. Even though he was rejected by the man he loves, he still stayed in the hidden god sect to guard the sect." This time, it was Shi Zhongjian's turn to be stunned. He stared blankly at Ji Tianqing and said with a strange tone, wait a moment. "Big brother Tianqing, are you mistaken?" "Mistaken about what?" Ji Tianqing asked subconsciously. Shi Zhongjian lowered his voice and said with a strange tone, "Our sect leader's surname is Shui. She is a woman." A woman?" Ji Tianqing was also stunned. His expression became very strange, and he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Shi Zhongjian stared at him with wide eyes and said blankly, "What do you think?" This misunderstanding was too big. Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes, who was standing at the side, heard everything clearly and almost burst out laughing. However, he kept his head down and his shoulders trembling. It was obvious that he was having a hard time holding back his laughter. An hour later, Ji Tianqing and Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes settled down in the hidden god sect. The mountain peak was vast and there were 16 palaces and courtyards in total. It could accommodate 3,000 people. However, there were only a little more than 1,000 people in the hidden god sect, including the disciples, servants, and guards. Therefore, the palaces and courtyards were very quiet and secluded. Shi Zhongjian arranged a small courtyard for Ji Tianqing. After Shi Zhongjian helped Ji Tianqing settle down, he sat in the living room with Ji Tianqing, drinking tea and chatting. Ji Tianqing didn't want to waste time and went straight to the point. "Lion, I came to the hidden god sect this time for an extremely important matter. I want to see your sect leader as soon as possible. I remember you said that you are the second disciple of the hidden god sect. You should be able to see the sect leader, right?" Shi Zhongjian hesitated and frowned. He explained awkwardly, "Big brother Tianqing, I know that you have something important to do. If I can help you, I will definitely do it. However, Lord Sect Leader has always been mysterious and rarely shows herself. The sect's affairs have always been managed by the Great Elder and my master. In the past 10 years, I have only seen Lord Sect Leader once. It is said that Lord Sect Leader has always been in secluded cultivation. Even if I want to help you, I'm afraid that I won't be able to see her." Ji Tianqing's eyes flashed with disappointment. However, he immediately had an idea and said, "If that's the case, then take me to see your master. I will tell her the whole story and let her pass it on to your sect leader." Chapter 1329. Shi Zhongjian immediately fulfilled his promise and brought Ji Tianqing to see his master. His master was the second elder of the hidden god sect, a soul refinement realm expert who had cultivated for 400 years. The second elder doted on Shi Zhongjian very much. When she learned that Shi Zhongjian had something to discuss with her, she immediately put down whatever she was doing and received him and Ji Tianqing in the living room. When Ji Tianqing saw the second elder, he realized that she was a middle-aged woman. She looked graceful, elegant, and kind. The two exchanged greetings, and when the second elder learned of Ji Tianqing's identity, she was very grateful to him. After all, Shi Zhongjian had already told the second elder about his adventure with Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing exchanged a few pleasantries, and then told the second elder the reason for his visit. Second elder, I am here on the orders of the emperor to discuss an important matter with your sect master. Unfortunately, your sect master is very secretive, so I would like to ask the second elder to help me pass on a message. The second elder nodded slightly and said in a gentle voice, Young Master Ji, if this old woman can help with this matter, I will definitely do so. But please understand that our sect master is in secluded cultivation and cannot be disturbed. Can you please tell this old woman why the emperor of the human race sent you here? If the matter is very urgent, this old woman can only pass on the message to Lord Sect Master. Otherwise, this old woman cannot rashly disturb the sect master's cultivation. Ji Tianqing saw the second elder's expression and guessed that she didn't know either. Sigh, the hidden god sect has hidden this matter very well. Even Elder Lien Er doesn't know that the hidden god sect is a subordinate force of the emperor. What should we do now that the sect master of the hidden god sect is in secluded cultivation? Ji Tianqing frowned slightly and sighed in his heart. After a moment of silence, he looked at the second elder with sincere eyes and said in a serious tone, Second elder, your sect is a hidden sect and has always been in seclusion. Perhaps you don't know the significance of the emperor's decree of the human race's emperor. However, I have to tell you that this matter is of utmost importance. It is even related to the fate and survival of the hidden god sect. As long as you seek an audience with your sect master and tell her that the emperor has sent someone here with a decree, she will definitely know what to do. Hearing how serious Ji Yunshu was, the second elder was shocked. His eyes widened and he said in disbelief, Young Master Ji, don't be an alarmist. I swear on my head. Ji Tianqing said solemnly. The second elder stared at him for a while before nodding. All right, this old one is willing to believe young Master Ji this once. Young Master Ji, please go back and rest. This old one will inform the sect master as soon as possible. Ji Tianqing was very clear that the second elder was only temporarily pacifying him. He definitely couldn't make a decision on his own and would have to discuss it with the great elder. However, he couldn't say anything more. He could only get up and leave. By the time he returned to his courtyard, it was already late at night. Shi Zhongjian carried 2 pots of wine and excitedly ran over to drink with him, but he was stopped by him. Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes was also put into the sword world. He sat alone on the roof, bathing in the faint starlight and moonlight. He overlooked the entire sunless peak and the vast mountain range around it. Under the curtain of night, Sunless Peak was exceptionally quiet and serene, as if it had been forgotten by the world. There was a strong sense of loneliness and desolation. Ji Tianqing suddenly understood. No wonder Shi Zhongjian's personality was so simple, so sincere and passionate to others, and even a little silly at times. He lived on Sunless Peak for many years and had almost no contact with the outside world. Naturally, he could maintain a simple personality and treat others with sincerity. Even in the darkness of the night, the vast mountain range around Sunless Peak was still emitting smoke and flames from time to time. In the deep ravines and mountain streams in the distance, there were also streams of dark red light flowing. That was magma overflowing from the ground. Ji Tianqing frowned and thought silently, it seems that other than the sect master of the hidden god sect, no one else knows about the relationship between the hidden god sect and the imperial court, much less the existence of the heavenly dipper god fire cauldron. I don't know how long it will take for second elder to report this to sect master Shui. If that's the case, I can only think of another way and go find it myself. Finished speaking, he returned to his room and sat down. He closed his eyes and released his soul power, extending it in all directions to explore the entire sunless peak. His soul power was like an inescapable net that covered the entire sunless peak. Soon, the dozen or so palaces and mansions on the mountain peak, as well as the bricks and stones on the mountain peak, were clearly imprinted in his mind. He could clearly detect that there were 5 soul refinement realm experts and dozens of heaven origin realm experts in the palaces and mansions. Among these experts, the old drunkard guarding the mountain gate was the strongest. Ji Tianqing was a little puzzled. He repeatedly checked several times, but the result was still the same. The sect master of the hidden god sect is definitely stronger than the old drunkard. She is most likely a supreme expert of the primordial spirit realm. But I have searched the entire sunless peak and did not detect the aura of a supreme primordial spirit realm expert. It seems that sect master Shui is not on sunless peak. But if she is not on sunless peak, where could she be cultivating in seclusion? Ji Tianqing frowned and thought for a moment. Suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind, and he had a guess. That's right. Deep underground. The Imperial Emperor once said that there is a vast sea of magma deep in the Earth's core under sunless peak. That heavenly dipper god fire cauldron is sleeping in the magma sea. Could it be that sect master Shui is cultivating deep underground? Or is she guarding that divine cauldron personally? After this thought appeared in his mind, he impatiently manipulated his soul power to pass through sunless peak and explore deep underground. With his current strength, his soul power could cover 100 miles. He was confident that his soul could extend 100 miles and explore the situation deep underground. However, when his soul passed through sunless peak and extended 80 miles, it was blocked by a layer of dark red barrier. That layer of dark red barrier was like a curtain of flame that stretched across the rock layer underground. He tried a few times, but he could not break through the barrier and see the situation deep inside. Moreover, that barrier covered an area of 100 miles. It was so wide that it seemed boundless. Ji Tianqing was helpless. At the same time, he was even more certain that sect master Shui was very likely deep underground. He thought for a moment, then got up and left the small courtyard. He personally entered Sunless Peak and dived deep underground. In order to not be discovered by the elders of the hidden god sect and cause unnecessary misunderstandings, he was very careful. He restrained his soul aura and slowed down his diving speed. It took him half an hour to reach 80 miles underground. It was pitch black all around, and there were scorching rock layers everywhere. The temperature underground was extremely high. Even those hard rocks that did not melt had a hint of dark red. Ji Tianqing slowly approached the dark red barrier and prepared to observe that mysterious barrier. But at this moment, a cold voice suddenly sounded behind him. Chapter 1330. Ji Tianqing was about to take a closer look at the mysterious dark red light screen. Suddenly, a voice came from behind him. The voice was cold and the tone was full of mockery. He subconsciously turned his head and saw a black figure standing in a rock crack 100 steps behind him. Near the dark red light screen, there were wide rock cracks and holes. They seemed to be traces left behind by a volcanic eruption. Ji Tianqing was also standing on a rock, frowning as he sized up the figure. It was a sloppy man with knotted hair. His clothes were greasy and full of holes. There was no doubt that it was the old drunkard who was guarding the mountain gate. However, he was not holding a wine gourd at the moment, nor was he as drunk as he was during the day. His eyes were clear and bright, and his body was no longer hunched. He was actually emitting an invisible and powerful aura. At this moment, he was no longer a sloppy drunkard. He had truly recovered the aura and majesty of a top expert. He stared at Ji Tianqing with a fierce look in his eyes, sneered, and said with a cold tone, "I've long known that you, little rascal, tried every means to sneak into our sect because you're up to no good. This old man was right. You sneaked into our sect's forbidden area in the middle of the night on your first day in our sect. How audacious." As he spoke, he released an invisible spiritual pressure that pressed down on Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing was indifferent. He looked at him calmly and asked, with my strength, it is impossible for you to get within 300 meters of me without making a sound. How did you do it? Ha ha ha, you don't need to know. The old drunkard sneered disdainfully, this old man is an expert at the 9th level of the soul-refining realm. How can I not have secret techniques and consummate skills? Moreover, this is Sunless Peak. This old man has lived here for hundreds of years. I am very familiar with every brick and stone here. Ji Tianqing nodded and stopped asking about this matter. He said with a calm expression, I know. Even if I told you that I have no evil intentions towards the hidden god sect and that I am only doing this because of an emergency, you wouldn't believe me, would you? Humph. Old drunkard pursed his lips and sneered. Ji Tianqing nodded again, spread out his hands and said, if that's the case, then there's nothing more to say. Let's fight. The old drunkard frowned and shouted in a deep voice, kid, you're up to no good. You've been caught red-handed by this old man, yet you don't have the slightest intention of remorse. You still dare to be so arrogant? I have a clear conscience. Why should I repent? Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and asked. How stubborn. Old drunkard scolded angrily. He pointed behind him and said, this old man can see that you're a talented man with decent strength. If you have the guts, then fight with this old man outside. Don't hurt the innocent disciples of our sect. Ji Tianqing naturally nodded in agreement, of course, I have no ill intentions towards the hidden god sect, and I do not wish to harm anyone. Hypocrite. Old drunkard snorted coldly again, turned around, and flew out. The two of them were like lightning, shuttling through the ground at high speed. After a short 10 breaths, the two of them left Sunless Peak and flew towards the mountains in the distance. After 100 breaths, the two of them flew 300 miles before old drunkard stopped in the air above a valley. Kid, let's fight here. It won't affect our sect. Since you're young, this old man will let you make the first move. Old drunkard put his left hand behind his back and waved his right hand, making a please gesture. He had the demeanor of a master. Ji Tianqing stared at him and said calmly, Senior, I don't want to hurt you, so let's stop here. Moreover, I don't want to alarm the elders and disciples of your sect. If you want to leak information, then don't blame me. Old drunkard immediately grinned and sneered, ha ha ha. Kid, weren't you quite rampant just now? Now that you have a guilty conscience, why are you still afraid of being found out? This old man will take you down and hand you over to our sect's elders to be punished according to our sect's laws. Ji Tianqing frowned and cupped his fists, saying, if that's the case, then I can only offend you. As his voice fell, he did not give old drunkard any time to react and drew his broken sword as fast as lightning. Draw your sword. With the pitch-black broken sword in hand, a blazing white sword light with a tinge of purple instantly slashed out. It cut through the dark night and slashed towards old drunkard. You're really something. Old drunkard's expression changed and his eyes flashed wildly. Without hesitation, he took out his wine gourd and released an incomparably vigorous dermic power into the wine gourd. Swoosh! The green-skinned gourd suddenly expanded and became a huge gourd over 100 feet tall, emitting a soaring green light. The dazzling sword light slashed at the green gourd with a loud bang, and a loud muffled sound was heard. The green light that filled the sky was shattered and splashed in all directions, illuminating the night sky for hundreds of miles. The wine gourd was blasted away and smashed into a mountain dozens of miles away. The barren 10,000 feet tall mountain was smashed into pieces on the spot, collapsing into scorched earth and ruins all over the ground. In the ruins, flames and black smoke rose into the sky. An endless cloud of dust burst out, covering the night sky within a radius of tens of miles. After the sword light blasted the green gourd away, it did not shatter and slashed towards old drunkard again. Old drunkard's expression changed drastically. He raised his palms and condensed two huge green palms, trying to clamp down on the sword light that was hundreds of feet long. However, with a loud bang, the huge green palm was smashed into pieces. Old Drunkard was also sent flying, rolling and crashing into the valley. A huge crater was formed in the deep valley. Dust flew everywhere and flames soared into the sky. Ji Tianqing did not chase after him. He stood in the sky and looked down. After a while, Old Drunkard rushed out of the crater and flew back into the sky. His body was charred and his clothes were full of holes. More than half of his hair was curled, and his face was covered in ashes. He looked very miserable. "Boy, I really underestimated you. However, I'm going to use my real strength now." Old Drunkard shouted angrily. With a flash of green light in his palm, a dark green sword appeared. He held the dark green sword with both hands. His body burst out with energy and his robe fluttered fiercely. A sword of separation. Old Drunkard activated all his skills and suddenly waved the dark green sword, slashing at Ji Tianqing fiercely. Suddenly, a huge sword light that was thousands of feet long tore the vast night sky apart. With the power to destroy heaven and earth, it arrived in front of Ji Tianqing. Wherever the sword light passed, the night sky was torn into two halves. It was as if it was separated into two spaces. Good sword technique. It's really something. Ji Tianqing could not help but praise when he saw the mystery of this sword technique. Of course, while praising, he also waved the sword of burial of heaven with a serious face and used a unique sword technique. Swing the sword. He held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands and swung it out. A crescent-shaped sword light that was thousands of feet long was slashed towards Old Drunkard. The two sword lights, one green and one white, were almost the same size and power. Chapter 1331. Kaboom! When the two huge sword lights collided, a thunderous explosion resounded, shaking the heavens. Everything within 100 miles trembled violently, and a violent hurricane swept up the dust and smoke in the sky. The two sword lights collapsed at the same time, bursting into light fragments that illuminated half of the sky. However, this was not the final result. The two of them could not fight to a draw. After the crescent-shaped blazing white sword light collapsed, countless lightning arcs surged out, enveloping the Old Drunkard like an inescapable net. The Old Drunkard was caught off guard and was instantly enveloped by the huge lightning net. Following a series of crackling sounds, the Old Drunkard's body convulsed and twisted like a sieve under the bombardment of lightning. Then, his body was charred black and smoking as he fell straight down from the sky, crashing into the valley with a bang. Bang! Following a dull explosion, the Old Drunkard once again smashed a huge hole in the valley, splashing dust all over the sky. This gentlemanly duel came to an end. The loud explosion that reverberated between heaven and earth gradually dissipated, and the dust that covered the sky slowly settled down. The Old Drunkard's body was charred black and smoking as he lay in the deep hole, unable to move. From time to time, he would convulse and let out muffled groans. Ji Tianqing descended from the sky and came to the edge of the big hole, looking down at the Old Drunkard in the hole. After hesitating for a moment, he cupped his hands and said, "Senior, I'm sorry to offend you." Then, he waved his hands and used a secret technique. Rays of golden light condensed into a mysterious seal. Seal. After the seal was formed, he shouted and pointed at the Old Drunkard with both hands. That mysterious seal immediately drilled into the Old Drunkard's body and enveloped him. The power of the seal erupted and immediately sealed the Old Drunkard's physical body, magic power, and soul power. The Old Drunkard was like a piece of charred wood, lying motionless at the bottom of the hole, unable to make any sound. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and lifted him out of the deep hole. Then, he carried the Old Drunkard and flew back to Sunless Peak, quickly disappearing into the night. The commotion caused by the fight between the two of them was so great that it had alarmed the experts of the Hidden God sect. When Ji Tianqing returned to the Hidden God sect, there were many deacons, elders, and disciples checking the situation. There were even a few experts flying towards the scene of the incident. Fortunately, Ji Tianqing's movements were concealed, so he was not discovered by anyone. He brought Old Drunkard back to the small courtyard where he lived and threw Old Drunkard onto the bed. Unable to struggle or resist, the Old Drunkard could only stare at him with his eyes wide open, revealing a look of intense anger and questioning. Ji Tianqing saw his pitiful appearance and couldn't help but comfort him. "Senior, I had no choice but to do this. I can only ask you to suffer for a while." With that, he cast a spell and burrowed into the ground, diving deep into the ground. Half an hour later, he once again dived 80 miles into the ground and approached the dark red barrier. This time, no one disturbed him, so he focused on studying the dark red light curtain. A quarter of an hour later, he figured out that this dark red light curtain was a huge defensive formation. Moreover, this was a primordial spirit realm sealing array that sealed an area of 1,000 miles. In other words, if he wanted to enter Sunless Peak and find the magma ocean deep in the Earth's core, he had to pass through this defensive array. It's almost impossible for me to break a primordial spirit realm sealing array with my attainments and strength. But there's a primordial spirit realm sealing array hidden under Sunless Peak. It's very likely to be to hide a huge secret. It must be related to the heavenly dipper god fire cauldron. Ji Tianqing furrowed his brows and pondered silently. He couldn't do anything about this sealing formation, but his heart was itching. He really wanted to enter and search for Sect Master Shui's traces. After all, he had already dealt with Old Drunkard, so he couldn't give up halfway, right? Just as he was frowning and thinking, the voice of the burial of heaven sounded in his mind. "It's just a low-grade primordial spirit realm sealing array, what's so difficult about it?" Suddenly hearing the voice of the burial of heaven, Ji Tianqing's eyes flashed and he asked, "Burial of heaven, can you break this array?" The burial of heaven was silent, as if it was secretly observing this array. After about 10 breaths, its voice sounded again. "It's indeed a low-grade primordial spirit realm sealing array, and it's a beginner-level primordial spirit realm sealing array. It doesn't even use the primordial spirit realm sealing array. If I'm not wrong, this is just a beginner-level heavenly breeze flowing fire array. The person who set up this array has just reached the primordial spirit realm and his foundation is still shallow. This array has a radius of 1,000 miles, and with the help of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and the power of the earth's core, it can continue to operate for tens of thousands of years without drying up." Hearing the words of the burial of heaven, Ji Tianqing felt much more at ease. "Since you know so much about this array, I'm relieved." The burial of heaven said indifferently, "I can't break the array with my divine soul avatar, but I'll pass on the method to break the array to you and help you at the critical moment. I guarantee that you'll be able to break it." "Good." Ji Tianqing nodded excitedly and quickly replied, "I'm ready, let's start now." "Then listen carefully." The burial of heaven said in a low and solemn voice, "The heavenly breeze flowing fire array is only a beginner-level primordial spirit realm sealing array. It only uses 12 methods of setting up the array, which are, the burial of heaven told Ji Tianqing the method of setting up the heavenly breeze flowing fire array, its structure and principles, and taught him the method to break it. After 15 minutes, when the burial of heaven finished, Ji Tianqing memorized the method to break the array and seriously studied it for a long time. After an hour, after he had completely understood, he waved his palms and used his mana to break the array. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Streaks of dark golden light streaked across the night sky like water pillars and landed on the dark red light barrier. The light barrier suddenly trembled slightly, and endless dark red flames splashed out and spread in all directions. Ji Tianqing was in the sea of fire and was surrounded by rolling flames, but he did not feel any pain. He continued to focus on breaking the array. He did his best to break the array and forgot about the passage of time. Unknowingly, 6 hours had passed. The method to break the array was about to be completed, and a crack could already be clearly seen on the dark red light barrier. Finally, at the critical moment, the Burial of Heaven sword flew over without hesitation, releasing a powerful and mysterious black light, and stabbed into the crack. An invisible and majestic power immediately poured into the dark red light barrier and spread along the lines of the array. Crack! With a crisp sound, a wash-basin-sized gap appeared on the dark red light barrier. A stream of crimson fire as thick as a bucket suddenly gushed out like a fountain. Chapter 1332. Even though the core fire was very powerful, Ji Tianqing was not afraid at all. He immediately held the sword of Burial of Heaven and flew toward the gap. Swoosh! He turned into a streak of golden light, passed through the gushing dark red flames, and entered the gap. In the next moment, he entered the heavenly wind-flowing fire array. As far as the eye could see, there was a dark red color everywhere. Around him was the dark night sky, with red flames floating in spirals, surging like waves. 10 miles below him was a crimson sea filled with dark red magma. The endless magma flowed slowly, emitting red flames that soared into the sky, turning the surroundings into a sea of fire. Ji Tianqing was in the rolling sea of fire, enduring the terrifying heat at all times. But his body had been refined to the extreme, and his defense was extremely strong. He was not afraid of the core fire at all. He looked around and quickly saw that this magma sea was very wide, as if it had no end. Above him was the rock layer, below him was the magma sea, and there was a 10-mile space in between. Such a strange terrain was very rare in the depths of the earth. He was sure that this magma sea had always existed since ancient times. Moreover, Sect Master Shui and the Heavenly Dipper God Fire Cauldron he was looking for were in this magma sea. But this magma sea was too vast, and it was too difficult to find a person and a divine cauldron. Ji Tianqing had no other choice. He could only release his soul power into the magma sea and search from the south to the north. He flew above the magma sea, and wherever he passed, his soul power would scan the surrounding 30 miles, carefully searching. This vast sea of lava was not simple. It contained an invisible and mysterious power that suppressed the power of his soul. In the outside world, his soul power could search a radius of 100 miles. But in this magma sea, he could only search a radius of 30 miles. Unknowingly, 2 hours passed. Ji Tianqing carefully searched the magma sea within a radius of 200 miles. Unfortunately, he did not find any clues, and there was no trace of Sect Master Shui or the Heavenly Dipper God Fire Cauldron. He could only expand the search area and search patiently. Time passed quietly, and soon, 10 hours had passed. Ji Tianqing searched a radius of 2,000 miles and searched the entire sea of lava, but he still couldn't find Patriarch Shui and the Heavenly Dipper God Fire Cauldron. But in the process, he encountered several powerful demonic beasts that lived in the magma ocean. There was a lava giant that was hundreds of meters tall. Its entire body was condensed from lava, and it possessed extremely terrifying power. There were also some fire spirits that were more than 10 meters tall and had a variety of forms. They usually looked like dark red fireballs, sleeping quietly in the sea of lava. Once an enemy approached, those fire spirits would be awakened and transform into various forms, nimbly and swiftly launching attacks. Other than that, there were also 2 dark golden fire pythons entrenched in the sea of lava. These demonic beasts were all rare species. In the sea of magma, they had unique cultivation conditions, and their strength grew very quickly. These demonic beasts were all at the 2nd and 3rd level of the soul-refining realm. When they discovered Ji Tianqing, they were intimidated by his powerful aura and retreated far away. Only those few fire spirits tried to attack a few times. However, Ji Tianqing easily repelled them, scaring them into hurriedly fleeing, not daring to harass him again. I've already searched for 10 hours and searched the entire sea of lava, but I still can't find Patriarch Shui and the Heavenly Dipper God Fire Cauldron. The seal I placed on the old drunkard only lasts for 12 hours. The time is almost up. If I still can't find Patriarch Shui, after the old drunkard seal is removed, this matter will be exposed. At that time, I'm afraid there will be some twists and turns, and there will be some unnecessary misunderstandings and conflicts. Ji Tianqing pondered silently, then furrowed his brows anxiously. He couldn't understand. He had clearly searched the entire sea of lava, but why couldn't he find Patriarch Shui and the Heavenly Dipper God Fire Cauldron? Could it be that Patriarch Shui and the cauldron weren't in the sea of lava, and his deduction was wrong? After pondering hard for a long time, Ji Tianqing suddenly had a flash of inspiration as he thought of a certain possibility. If they're not in the sea of lava, could they be even deeper down? Thinking of this, he hurriedly drilled into the sea of lava, and flew even deeper underground. The temperature of the lava was terrifyingly hot, enough to melt ordinary soul-level magic treasures. Ji Tianqing's body was wrapped in a layer of golden light, protecting himself. He could freely travel through the sea of lava, and he wouldn't be harmed. Soon, he passed through the sea of lava more than 20 miles deep, and drilled into the underground rock layer. He released his spiritual power, and spread it out in all directions, carefully searching underground. About 2 hours later, he came to the center of the sea of lava, and it was located in the rock layer 120 miles underground. Suddenly, his spiritual power detected a majestic spiritual power fluctuation in the rock layer not far in front of him. There was also a dark red flowing fire that enveloped the rock layer in a radius of 10 miles, like a huge ball of light. Finally found it. It must be here. Ji Tianqing's spirit was immediately shaken, and he hurriedly drilled forward. In the blink of an eye, he came close to the flowing fireball. After careful observation with his spiritual power, he found that there was a huge cave hidden in the rock layer wrapped in the ball of light. That cave was at least 1,000 feet wide. The vast and mighty divine soul power and the violent and powerful flame aura were coming from that cave. However, the cave was protected by the flowing fireball. If he wanted to enter and check the situation in the cave, he had to break the huge light shield of the fireball. He carefully observed for a long time, and found that this huge flowing fireball was also a light shield formed by a defensive formation. This formation was the heavenly wind flowing fire formation that he had broken before, but it was a smaller version of the formation, and its power was more condensed, and its defense was stronger. But this was not a problem for him. He repeated the same trick, and used all his strength to break the formation. After 2 hours, he broke a hole in the light shield formed by the dark red flowing fire. Swoosh! He turned into a golden flowing light, passed through the hole, and entered the formation. He walked along the thick rock layer for about 10,000 feet, and then entered an empty cave. Only now did he see the situation in the cave. The cave was oval in shape like an egg, and the surrounding rock walls were rough and uneven. It was obvious that it was naturally formed. The originally dark rock walls were burned red by the geocentric fire. The entire cave was filled with flowing fire, and it was vast and mighty like a flood. In the middle of the cave, there was a golden altar that was 300 feet wide and 10 feet tall. At the top of the ancient and mysterious altar, there was an ancient bronze cauldron as large as a house. Chapter 1333. Ji Tianqing's eyes were glued to the bronze dragon tripod. He could not take his eyes off of it. The style of the bronze tripod was ancient and simple. There were no complicated patterns or patterns. It was simple but majestic. Other than the 6 ears and 9 dragons as decorations, there were 4 lines of ancient words engraved on the tripod. Even with his knowledge and experience, he could not identify what those words were. He only knew that this ancient, mysterious and majestic bronze tripod must be the Big Dipper God Fire tripod that he was about to get. The divine tripod stood motionless at the top of the altar. There was a hint of dark red on the tripod and it emitted a terrifying heat. Inside the bronze tripod, there was an endless amount of heavenly wind and flowing fire. It was spewed out from the mouths of the 9 dragons, forming 9 dragon-shaped fire pillars that did not dissipate for a long time. Ji Tianqing stared at the divine tripod with bright eyes. He was in awe and his heart was moved. But at this moment, a cold and dignified female voice suddenly sounded in the cave. "Who are you?" Ji Tianqing was suddenly awakened. He immediately turned his head and looked to the north of the cave. He saw that at the northern edge of the cave, there was a 10-foot-high platform. There was a wide throne on it. The throne was very exquisite and beautiful. It was inlaid with all kinds of dark red, dark gold and dazzling purple gems. It exuded a sacred and luxurious aura. Most importantly, this throne was extremely beneficial to one's cultivation. On the luxurious throne sat an old woman in a luxurious green robe. The old woman looked like she was in her 70s or 80s. Her waist-long hair had turned silver and was tied up in a dignified and elegant bun with a jade hairpin. But the old woman's face did not look old. Her skin was still white and soft. She was no different from a woman in her 30s. Her face could not be called beautiful, but she had a dignified and elegant temperament. She looked extremely noble. Her eyes were bright and deep. They contained the light of wisdom, but they were not aggressive. Even though she was glaring at Ji Tianqing, the uninvited guest, with hostility emanating from her body, her gaze was not fierce. Ji Tianqing believed that one's face was a reflection of one's heart. Looking at this silver-haired old woman's face and eyes, he could guess that she must be a kind and benevolent old woman. However, even though the silver-haired old woman's aura was gentle, her body contained enough power to shake the heavens and earth. Her aura was incomparably powerful, as vigorous as a mountain, causing Ji Tianqing to feel reverence in his heart. He could almost immediately determine that the strength of the silver-haired old woman had long surpassed the spirit refinement realm and reached the essence spirit realm. After a moment of silence, he walked to the center of the cave and bowed to the silver-haired old woman from afar. However, before he could say his name, the silver-haired old woman's expression changed drastically when she saw his face. She had been sitting on the throne, meditating and cultivating the whole time. At this moment, she widened her eyes in shock and stared at Ji Tianqing in disbelief. She actually sat up with a swoosh. "You. Moss. Master?" The silver-haired old woman's expression was very complicated. Her eyes flickered, and the rim of her eyes was a little wet. She held the throne with one hand and stood up with a trembling body. She quickly walked toward Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing immediately swallowed the words he was about to say and looked at the silver-haired old woman with confusion. "Strange, I haven't said my name and identity. Why is she so emotional? No, she doesn't even know me. Even if she saw me, she wouldn't be so emotional. She must have mistaken me for someone else." Thinking of this, he quickly said to the silver-haired old woman, "Senior, if I'm not wrong, you are Master Shui of the Hidden God sect, right? I am Ji Tianqing, the domain lord of the Tianqin domain. I have come to the Hidden God sect to visit Master Shui under the orders of the Emperor." After saying this, he took out the seal of mountains and rivers and presented it to the silver-haired old woman. The silver-haired old woman's body stiffened, and she was stunned on the spot. She frowned and stared at Ji Tianqing for a long time. Then she muttered in a low voice, "Impossible, how can there be such a similar person in this world?" After a while, she suppressed the shock and excitement in her heart and calmed down. She stared at the seal of mountains and rivers and observed it carefully for a moment. Then, she sized up Ji Tianqing a few times before speaking in a calm tone, "I am the sect master of the Hidden God sect, Shui Ruoyu. Young man, did you just say that you are the domain lord of the Tianqin domain, Ji Tianqing?" "That's right, it's me." Ji Tianqing suppressed the doubts in his heart and nodded calmly. Shui Ruoyu continued to stare at him and asked, "You have come to our sect to look for me under the orders of the Emperor of the human race?" "Yes." Ji Tianqing nodded again. He didn't show it on his face, but he was muttering in his heart, so the master of the hidden god sect is called Shui Ruoyu. Such an elegant name, she must have been a beauty when she was young. However, she is the master of a sect, a primordial spirit realm expert. Who did she think I was just now? How could she lose her composure and be so emotional? At this time, Shui Ruoyu turned and walked back to the throne and sat down gracefully. She looked down at Ji Tianqing with deep eyes and said in a dignified tone, "Since you claim to be under the orders of the emperor, do you have the emperor's decree? If you don't have the emperor's personal decree, no matter what you say, I will not forgive you for trespassing on the forbidden grounds." Ji Tianqing was already prepared. He quickly took out the emperor's personal decree from his spatial ring. "Master Shui, I had no choice but to trespass on the forbidden grounds. Your sect has hidden the matters regarding the divine cauldron and the imperial court too deeply. Even the elders in the sect don't know about it. I couldn't see you, so I decided to trespass on my own." He gave a simple explanation. After he finished speaking, he waved his hand and shot out a golden light. It wrapped around the emperor's decree and flew to Shui Ruoyu. Shui Ruoyu stretched out her hand to receive the decree. She waved her hand and shot out rays of golden light. She executed a secret technique to undo the seal on the scroll. After a moment, the scroll slowly unfolded and floated in front of her. It lit up with a dazzling golden light. Ji Tianqing didn't know what was written in the emperor's decree. He only saw that when Shui Ruoyu saw the contents of the decree, her expression changed slightly. Her eyes even flashed with shock and disbelief. In fact, Shui Ruoyu couldn't help but take a few more glances at him before she finished reading the decree. This made him even more puzzled. He secretly guessed, what did the emperor say in the decree? Isn't it to take away the divine cauldron? After a long while, Shui Ruoyu finished reading the decree. She then kept the scroll and solemnly kept it in her spatial ring. She looked at Ji Tianqing with a burning gaze. Her gaze was complicated. She seemed to be excited and her heart was filled with emotions. After a moment of silence, she then asked, "Ji Tianqing, are you really the successor of the Kenshin?" Chapter 1334. Could it be that the monarch had pointed out my identity in the edict and said that I am the successor of the Kenshin? This was the first thought that appeared in Ji Tianqing's mind. He nodded at Shui Ruoyu and answered truthfully, "That's right." Shui Ruoyu's pupils contracted as her emotions became even more complicated. She actually sighed. She lowered her head slightly as a trace of sadness appeared in her eyes, as if she was recalling something from the past. A moment later, she continued to ask, "Tianqing, can you tell this old one how you obtained the Kenshin inheritance?" This. Ji Tianqing immediately frowned and hesitated to answer. He could naturally see that Shui Ruoyu's impression and attitude towards him had become much closer after learning that he was the successor of the Kenshin. He could no longer suppress the doubts in his heart as he asked Shui Ruoyu, "Sect Master Shui, this junior doesn't quite understand. Why are you asking about the Kenshin? This junior has come to the hidden god sect under the monarch's orders to take away the heavenly dipper god fire cauldron. What does this have to do with the Kenshin?" Shui Ruoyu was startled for a moment before she laughed involuntarily. Her laughter actually contained some bitterness and self-mockery. "Tianqing, don't be anxious about the heavenly dipper god fire cauldron. We can talk about it later. This old one only respects and admires the Kenshin. After learning that you are the successor of the Kenshin, I want to know more about you. You should be able to understand this old one's feelings, right?" Ji Tianqing shook his head as he said in a low voice, "Sect Master Shui, this junior may be young, but I am not someone who is ignorant of worldly affairs. When this junior barged into the cave just now, your mind was already in chaos the moment you saw this junior. You lost your composure and even mistook this junior for someone else. This junior is certain that you do not simply respect and admire the Kenshin. It is very likely that you are related to the Kenshin in some way. As he spoke, he stared intently at Shui Ruoyu, observing the changes in her expression. As expected, Shui Ruoyu's complexion changed slightly. Her gaze was somewhat evasive. She didn't dare to look directly into his eyes. Seeing her reaction, Ji Tianqing was even more certain. He continued, "A long time ago, a peerless master once told me that Kenshin had never taken in any disciples when he was alive, but he had 4 followers who could be considered his in-name disciples. The surnames of these 4 in-name disciples were Gu, Yi, Xiao, and Shui. As the descendant of the Sword God, I have a mission, and that is to find these 4 seniors. Before this, I had already found Yi Hengchuan and Xiao Wentian. Ren Huangyi lived in seclusion in the boundless realm of the Mangum mountain range. He guarded the city alone and waited bitterly for one person. On the other hand, Xiao Wentian lived in seclusion in the great swamp of the southern wasteland and established the Xiao clan, an ancient family. He had long since flourished and had many children and grandchildren, enjoying the rest of his life. Of the 4 seniors, only Gu and Shui have not been found, and there have been no clues." Ji Tianqing spoke frankly with assurance. When Shui Ruoyu heard these words, she tilted her head slightly. Her expression was very complicated as she remained silent. Ji Tianqing revealed a slight smile and said calmly, "When I came to the Hidden God sect previously, I only wanted to follow orders to retrieve the divine cauldron. I never thought about this matter. Even when I knew that the surname of the sect master of the Hidden God sect was Shui, I never thought about this. It was only now that I finally understand why you were so agitated. Even as an immortal soul stage master, you actually lost your composure. Sect Master Shui, if I'm not wrong, you are one of the 4 in-name disciples of Kenshin, Guyi, Xiao, Shui and Shui, right?" After he finished speaking, he looked at Shui Ruoyu with a look of intense anticipation. Shui Ruoyu was silent for a long time before she slowly turned her head to look at him. At this moment, not only did she look a little sad, but her eyes were also covered with a thin layer of mist. As an immortal soul stage master and a sect master, her heart was as still as water. She was an expert with a strong will and wouldn't lose her composure easily. If her will wasn't strong enough, how could she have guarded the Hidden God sect and protected the divine cauldron for hundreds of years? But now that she saw Ji Tianqing and heard Ji Tianqing talk about the past, she couldn't help but cry. This was because Ji Tianqing's guess was right. She was indeed the 4th disciple of Kenshin, Shui Ruoyu. Furthermore, she had many stories, and her heart was filled with too much pain. "Tianqing. You are indeed Master's successor. Master's legacy will definitely be brought to greater heights in your hands. When you speak with fervor and assurance, your confident appearance and high spirits are so similar to Master back then." Shui Ruoyu looked at Ji Tianqing and squeezed out a smile. Her tone was filled with emotion and reminiscence. When Ji Tianqing saw her expression and eyes, he suddenly felt a sense of déjà vu, and his heart was touched. "I seem to have seen Sect Master Shui's expression and eyes on Shaolin before. That's a kind of regret of not being able to love someone deeply. But compared to Shaolin, there's more despair and reminiscence in her eyes. After all, Kenshin is already dead. Sect Master Shui will never be able to see him again. Could it be that Sect Master Shui, as an in-name disciple of Kenshin, has fallen in love with Kenshin for her entire life?" This thought suddenly flashed across Ji Tianqing's mind, and he was stunned. At the same time, Burial of Heaven's deep and aged voice sounded in his mind. "You brat, you've finally understood." Ah! Ji Tianqing understood what it meant and felt that it was unbelievable. Burial of Heaven, did I guess correctly? Burial of Heaven didn't reply to him. It said to Shui Ruoyu in a deep and solemn tone, "Shui, thousands of years have passed. You've also gone from a budding age to a white-haired person today. Why can't you resolve the knot in your heart and let him go? Shui Ruoyu was secretly upset. Suddenly hearing Burial of Heaven's voice, her body shook. She raised her sleeve to wipe away the tears in her eyes. She immediately turned her head and looked at Ji Tianqing with a burning gaze. She asked in disbelief, "Burial of Heaven? Is that its voice?" Ji Tianqing didn't say anything. He only nodded calmly. Burial of Heaven's voice sounded again. Its tone was filled with vicissitudes and emotions. Kenshin was obsessed with the way of the sword his entire life. He was born for the way of the martial way and died for the way of the divine way. There are many women like you who are infatuated with him without regret. But who can get his attention and love? Back then when Kenshin left, I reminded you not to be too emotional. In the end, the one who will be hurt will only be yourself. I didn't expect that after thousands of years, you would still be infatuated with him without regret. It's a pity that Kenshin won't be able to see it. This time, Shui Ruoyu heard it clearly. She was immediately sure that this was indeed Burial of Heaven's voice. She stared at Ji Tianqing with a burning gaze and said in a complicated tone, "Tianqing, you actually obtained the Burial of Heaven's sword? What is its current situation?" Ji Tianqing didn't say anything. He directly took out the broken Burial of Heaven and presented it in front of Shui Ruoyu. Shui Ruoyu's expression changed. Her figure flashed and flew over, landing beside Ji Tianqing. She stared at the Burial of Heaven's sword and asked anxiously, "Burial of Heaven? It really is you? Back then when you left with Master, where did you go?" Chapter 1335. Shui Ruoyu could not believe her eyes. She could not believe that after 1,000 years, she would be able to see the sword of Burial of Heaven again. She was very emotional. After seeing the Burial of Heaven, she could no longer hold back her anxiety and doubts. She could not wait to ask the Burial of Heaven what had happened back then. This question had been hidden in her heart for 1,000 years. It had always been an unsolved mystery. Now, she could finally ask the Burial of Heaven personally. She would soon know the answer. She could not help but stretch out her hands and hold the sword of Burial of Heaven. She looked at it expectantly, waiting for its answer. The Burial of Heaven was silent for a while before it said in a low voice, "Ah Shui, when Kenshin fell, I was also heavily injured and was almost completely destroyed. Even though I've awakened now, my memories are fragmented and incomplete. I can't remember clearly what happened in the past." Shui Ruoyu's body suddenly stiffened. The anticipation and anxiety in her heart gradually dissipated. No. How could this be? Burial of Heaven, you must know. You must know what happened. Think about it carefully. You will definitely remember. What happened to Master? The Burial of Heaven saw that she was getting more and more emotional. It comforted her, "I know that you have been worried for 1,000 years. This question has also troubled you for 1,000 years. But I really can't remember clearly. I can only wait until I recover my vitality and gradually recover my memories. Only then will I know what happened." Ji Tianqing stood silently at the side, listening to the Burial of Heaven comforting Shui Ruoyu. He did not open his mouth to interrupt. After a long time, Shui Ruoyu's emotions gradually calmed down. She endured the sadness and sorrow in her heart and temporarily put this matter aside. She sat back on the throne. After a while, she returned to her usual appearance. She was still as calm and serene as before. Ji Tianqing looked at her silently. Seeing her joy and sorrow, he gradually understood her feelings. It seems that Sect Master Shui is also a person with a lot of stories. She was infatuated with Kenshin. Even if 1,000 years had passed, she would never regret it. The left protector was infatuated with her and even confessed his feelings to her in public, but she heartlessly rejected him. In the end, he became an old drunkard who drank to drown his sorrows. Sigh. The word love is hard to describe in a few words. The bitterness in sect master Shui's heart has been buried deep for 1,000 years. Today, after seeing me in the burial of heaven, it is normal for her to lose her composure. These thoughts flashed through Ji Tianqing's mind, and he couldn't help but murmur in a low voice, "Once I see Kenshin, I'll make a mistake for life. If I don't see Kenshin, I'll make a mistake for life." At this time, Shui Ruoyu looked at Ji Tianqing with clear eyes and said calmly, "Tianqing, I lost my composure just now and let you see a joke. However, we were talking about private matters just now. Now, this old woman will talk business with you." Ji Tianqing nodded and bowed slightly. "Please speak, sect master Shui." Shui Ruoyu's expression was solemn, and she said solemnly, "Since you are here on the orders of the emperor, you must already know the origin of the heavenly dipper god fire cauldron and the origin of the hidden god sect. However, the heavenly dipper god fire cauldron is one of the clan protection divine artifacts of the imperial court, and it has a very strong restraining power against the devil race. However, this item is a divine artifact and not easy to control. Therefore, the imperial court will not use it unless it is absolutely necessary. Our sect was born to protect the heavenly dipper god fire cauldron, and it is very likely that we will die for it in the future." Hearing this, Ji Tianqing shook his head and said with a smile, "Sect master Shui, there is no need to worry. I am here to discuss this matter with you in order to take away the heavenly dipper god fire cauldron. The emperor has already given the order to give this cauldron to me. If I take it away, the hidden god sect will no longer need to protect it." Shui Ruoyu revealed a meaningful smile and shook her head lightly. "No, Tianqing, you are wrong. The hidden god sect was born to protect the heavenly dipper god fire cauldron, so it is natural that we will stay with it. Later, this old woman will help you refine the heavenly dipper god fire cauldron and obtain its approval. However, after you obtain the heavenly dipper god fire cauldron, this old woman will give you a big gift." "What gift?" Ji Tianqing frowned in confusion and asked subconsciously. "The hidden god sect." Shui Ruoyu pointed above her head and said in a solemn tone, "This old woman will give the entire hidden god sect to you. I can't accept this." Ji Tianqing was stunned for a moment, and quickly waved his hand to refuse. "Sect master Shui, the hidden god sect is the blood, sweat and tears of several generations of your sect. I can't accept your gift." Shui Ruoyu looked at him with a firm gaze and said with an unquestionable tone, "This matter is not something that you and I can decide. This is the emperor's decision, and he has already stated it clearly in the order." This. Ji Tianqing was speechless. After all, it was the emperor's order, and he couldn't refute it. After a moment of silence, he asked, "May I ask sect master Shui, what kind of gift are you talking about?" Shui Ruoyu revealed a kind smile and explained, "As long as you can obtain the heavenly dipper god fire cauldron's approval, the hidden god sect will be under your command and listen to your orders. In the future, when you go to the battlefield to resist the devil race's army, the hidden god sect will follow you to the battlefield and kill your enemies. Of course, you don't have to worry about the affairs of the hidden god sect. Normally, this old woman and the elders of the sect will take care of it, so you won't be distracted." Ji Tianqing thought for a moment and felt that this was a good idea, so he nodded in agreement. "Many thanks for sect master Shui's help. Since this is the emperor's order, I will follow it. Sect master Shui, please tell the elders and disciples of your sect that I don't have the time to care about the hidden god sect, and I won't interfere in the sect's affairs. Only when the imperial court needs us to stand up and fight against the devil race and protect the people of the human race, will I command the entire hidden god sect." That's good." Shui Ruoyu saw that he finally agreed and nodded in satisfaction. Ji Tianqing hesitated for a moment and continued, "Sect master Shui, now that the devil emperor has returned to the northern desert, the devil race is rising and their forces are growing rapidly. Now, the devil race's army is attacking the territories of the three races in a frenzy, trying to sweep across the profound sky continent, kill all living beings of the various races, and unify the world. Chaos has come, and as the domain lord under the imperial court, I naturally have to protect the peace of the region and fight against the devil race's army. In the past year, I have found Emperor Yi and Xiao Wentian and asked them to come out and help me fight against the devil emperor. Emperor Yi and Xiao Wentian have both agreed to this matter, and when I go to the northern desert, they will come out and help me. Today, I sincerely hope that Sect Master Shui can come out of seclusion and join us in resisting and dissolving the demon emperor's conspiracy. After he finished speaking, he looked at Shui Ruoyu with sincerity and bowed deeply. Shui Ruoyu didn't hesitate at all and nodded with a smile. Tianqing, in fact, you don't need to ask this old woman will do her best to help you. After all, this is the emperor's order. Chapter 1336. Seeing Shui Ruoyu agree decisively, Ji Tianqing let out a sigh of relief and hurriedly bowed to express his thanks. Many thanks for Sect Master Shui's help. Sect Master Shui is deeply righteous, this junior can't thank you enough. Shui Ruoyu waved her hand, indicating that he didn't need to be so courteous. She smiled amiably and said, in public, this old one is a trusted subordinate of the monarch. Naturally, I will obey the monarch's orders and help you with all my strength. In private, this old one is Master's fourth disciple, and you are the successor of Master's legacy. You are equivalent to this old one's junior brother. How can this old one not help you? Moreover, this old one also hates the devil race to the bone. I wish that I could be like Master, holding a 3-foot-long divine sword and slaughtering all the devils in the world. Hearing this, Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and asked with interest, oh. Sect Master Shui also has a blood feud with the devil race. That's right. Shui Ruoyu nodded and explained in a low voice, this old one was born in a family of generals since young. 3 generations of my ancestors were all valiant generals of the imperial court and had outstanding military achievements. When this old one was young, the devil race wreaked havoc in the world. The devil emperor invaded the central state and wantonly massacred the common people. This old one's grandfather, father, and uncles all died on the battlefield under the blades of the devil race experts. Later on, this old one's entire family was besieged by the devil race experts. More than 300 people in the family were killed. It was the monarch who saved this old one, allowing this old one to survive. Later on, this old one met Master. It was Master's guidance and teaching that allowed this old one to become a martial expert and have today's achievements. Speaking up to hear, Shui Ruoyu paused for a moment. Recalling those tragic past events, even after 1,000 years, she was still filled with grief and indignation. Her words were filled with monstrous hatred towards the devil race. After Master left the profound sky continent, this old one inherited my father's legacy and continued to serve the imperial court loyally. The monarch saw that this old one was talented and intelligent and was not suitable to lead an army in battle. Thus, he gave this old one a top-secret mission. Thus, this old one joined the divine hidden sect and started as an inner sect elder. 300 years ago, I was promoted to sect master and personally guarded the divine cauldron. After listening to Shui Ruoyu's narration of the past, Ji Tianqing finally understood the whole story. No wonder the water patriarch listened to the imperial court and guarded the cauldron for the imperial court. He hid his identity here for hundreds of years and was still loyal. I really didn't expect that sect master Shui, Kenshin and the monarch had such a relationship. If that's the case, the celestial emperor must have thought long and hard before sending me to the hidden god sect to look for sect master Shui and obtain the heavenly dipper god fire cauldron. Sex. That's why she's Willing's cauldron of Suvs. Sect masters. After that, the sect understood the sect well to understand, the master s2s. The sect s nos. Ji Tianqing listened patiently. He had a deeper understanding of Shui Ruoyu's past. Just as the old and the young were chatting happily, a stream of light suddenly flew over from the top of the cave and landed in front of Shui Ruoyu. Shui Ruoyu stretched out her hand and caught the stream of light in her palm. She opened her palm and saw that it was a communication jade slip with a seal on it. This was a secret jade slip that the first elder and second elder used only in emergencies. She raised her eyebrows and released a strand of consciousness from her primordial spirit. She entered the jade slip and checked the information inside. After a while, she put away the communication jade slip and glanced at Ji Tianqing with a strange expression. Ji Tianqing saw the change in her expression and guessed that it was probably a jade slip sent by the sect elder of the hidden god sect. The fact that he had injured the old drunkard and trespassed into the forbidden grounds must have been exposed. As expected, Shui Ruoyu looked at him with a playful expression and asked, Tianqing, before you trespassed into the forbidden grounds, did you beat up the left protector? Cough cough. Ji Tianqing was a little embarrassed. He explained with a smile, Sect Master Shui, I had no choice. Please forgive me. The left protector was guarding the mountain gate. He didn't know the relationship between the hidden god sect and the imperial court, so he stopped me from entering. Fortunately, I knew Shi Zhongjian and was able to enter the sect. But when I went to talk to the second elder about this, the second elder didn't know. I didn't know when the second elder would report this to you, so I had no choice but to trespass into the forbidden grounds. But I didn't expect that the left protector had his eyes on me. When I was breaking the formation, he suddenly appeared and wanted to catch me and punish me. I had no choice but to agree to leave Sunless Peak with him and fight outside. But don't worry, the left protector and I were fighting like gentlemen. We only exchanged 2 or 3 moves. Shui Ruoyu watched him explain the matter without stopping, and she was actually watching with great interest. There was a gentle smile on the corner of her mouth. After he finished speaking, Shui Ruoyu chuckled and asked in return, a battle between gentlemen? You've only exchanged 2 or 3 moves, and you've already beaten him black and blue, leaving him covered in wounds and charred like charcoal. The great elder sent a message saying that the left protector's injuries were quite serious. He would need at least 3 to 5 years to recover. Ji Tianqing rubbed the tip of his nose and smiled awkwardly. About this. I wasn't too sure about the left protector's strength. I didn't hold back at that time and used 60% of my strength. If I knew he was so weak, I would have only used 40% of my strength. Shui Ruoyu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She shook her head and said, Sigh, your little junior brother is really too monstrous. You are so young, but you have the strength of a half-step primordial spirit realm. You are twice as strong as the left protector. This is really shocking and rare. Now that I think about it, when Master was your age, his strength was far inferior to yours. Ji Tianqing just smiled and didn't say anything. The Burial of Heaven had also said something similar. Even when Kenshin was his age, he wasn't as monstrous as him. His strength and talent had already surpassed Kenshin's. After a moment of silence, Shui Ruoyu said in a gentle tone, Tianqing, even if the left protector was injured by you, you don't have to blame yourself. I won't blame you either. Who asked him to be unrestrained and drown his sorrows with alcohol all day long? He even ended up in such a sorry state. I look down on this kind of man the most. He gave up on himself after suffering a setback and thought that he could soften my heart. Only someone like Master who would rather break than submit and press forward courageously is a true hero, a peerless swordsman. With a 3-foot Qingfeng sword in hand, he dares to call the sun and moon to change the sky. Seeing Shui Ruoyu's disdain for the old drunkard, Ji Tianqing felt sympathy for the poor old drunkard. Sect Master Shui, actually, the left protector is also a sentimental person. He is too emotional, which is why he was hurt so badly. He suffered a setback and was ridiculed by others. He would rather resign from the position of protector but still stay at the mountain gate of the hidden god sect. He can't let go of you and wants to protect you for the rest of his life. Shui Ruoyu frowned and said with anger, Jianxing, you actually know about this? It must be that talkative brat Shi Zhongjian. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.